not sure why his computer's out.
Oh, I don't know. I'm just happy my mind's out here.
Right. Yeah, he hasn't used that thing forever.
That's true. Yeah.
Must be a new guy.
Hey, what's going on?
Hello.
Haley, are you there?
I'm here.
All right, we're about to start the meeting shortly.
Hey, my phone says you're the mayor.
I don't know what that means.
I was expecting Steve to be on the other end of this.
Yes, no, we. Yeah.
Back through and did some of that fun. I played Saturday pretty hardcore. Finally got through it yesterday. Remember up there 10 years ago.
Lee wasn't on the phone that oh, this is something I had sharing for you. These are questions. You didn't get it.
Well, I mean, I don't have a computer.
Right, there you go. I got it on my computer too.
All right, 7 p.m. in Gardner, Kansas. I'm going to call the Gardner City Council meeting to order. Will you please rise with me if you can and recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We have a couple of extra seats over here for those who might be standing in the back. Don't want to have you standing for a long time. And I hope that all of you have signed in on the sign-in sheet that was provided at the front of the room. Would love to have you register your attendance so that we can follow up with you after the meeting. We have a presentation of a proclamation for today, and it has to do with our two Major League Baseball players, Bubba Starling and John Means, from the Kansas City Royals and the Baltimore Orioles, respectively. We will be having a Gardner Day at the K on August 31st. The Orioles will be playing the Royals at Kauffman Stadium, and we may see John Means pitching to Bubba Starling, which will be great, but we will be sending out information on how you can get tickets, and we'll have some special drawings and other things to make this a really neat event. So I will read the proclamation now. Whereas Derek Bubba Starling was born and raised in Gardner, Kansas, and whereas John Means was born in Olathe and raised in Gardner, Kansas, and whereas both Means and Starling played on and starred on the Gardner Edgerton boys baseball team, and whereas both Starling and Means were proud 2011 graduates of Gardner Edgerton High School, and whereas Starling, an outfielder and two-sport star in both baseball and football, was drafted by the hometown Kansas City Royals with the number 5 overall pick in the 2011 Major League Baseball entry draft, and whereas Means, a pitcher, went to Fort Scott Community College and West Virginia University, excelling on the field at both institutions, and whereas Means was subsequently drafted in the 11th round of the 2014 MLB entry draft by the Baltimore Orioles, and whereas Baltimore promoted Means to their Major League roster on September 24, 2018, and after a sensational first half to the 2019 Major League Baseball season, Means was selected to play in the All-Star game, and whereas Starling was also promoted to the Major Leagues on July 12, 2019, and made his debut at home that evening playing center field, and whereas both Starling and Means will be playing at Kauffman Stadium when the Orioles visit the Royals August 30th to September 1st, I'm sorry. Now, therefore, be resolved that I, Steve Shue, Mayor of the City of Gardner, Kansas, do hereby proclaim August 31st, 2019, as Gardner Day at the K in the City of Gardner, Kansas, and urge our citizens to recognize the Gardner pride and perseverance these men have epitomized in achieving their dreams of making the big leagues. So, thank you. Yes. And I believe that a select number of folks who buy tickets to the game will be entered into and win a drawing to be on the field to meet the players during batting practice and even have some time with Bubba afterwards. We're still working on Orioles PR department to see if we can get John Means as well. So it's wonderful to have not one but two major leaguers that are active in the major leagues at the same time from a city our size. So congrats to both those men. All right. We do not have a public hearing tonight. We do have time for public comments. Members of the public are welcome to use this time to make comments about city matters or items on the agenda that are not part of a public hearing. Since we have a lot of people who are speaking on new business item number 1, I'd like to defer that comment period to that particular agenda item. But if you have something to say on anything else other than the new business item number 1, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Keep it to 5 minutes, no profanity, no personal attacks.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, thank you. My name is Adriana Mader, 32604 West 171st Court, Gardner, Kansas. I sent you all an email earlier today, so I just thought for public record, I would like to read that out loud. The subject is titled Public Input, NDO for LGBTQ. NDO, for those that don't know, Non-Discrimination Ordinance. Mayor and City Council, good evening. Please take this email message as my request to have an NDO for the LGBTQ community explored, drafted, and considered for adoption by the governing body of the City of Gardner, Kansas. To date, there is no federal law, state statute, or city municipal code that specifically provides protection for discrimination for the LGBTQ community. The City of Gardner, Kansas can be proactive and can adopt an NDO to protect people that are not currently covered. Several other communities within Johnson County, Kansas, and across the state of Kansas have already taken steps in this direction. I ask that the governing body of the City of Gardner be proactive and inclusive of all residents and do the same. Thank you for your consideration, Adriana Mater. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Adriana. Appreciate it. Any other public comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there any member of the council wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Melton, second Winters, that we approve the consent agenda. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed? Any abstentions? The consent agenda passes. Hi, Lee.
Come on, everybody.
So we'll move on now. We don't have any planning and zoning consent agenda items, no committee recommendations, no old business. We move on to new business. New business item number 1, consider adopting an ordinance rezoning Z-19-03 property located at the northwest corner of Moonlight Road and University Drive from RP3, R3, and RP4 to RP3 with an associated preliminary development plan PDP-19-03 for tall grass. Larry Powell, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Forgive me, I got a bit of a burr this evening, so I'll try and work around it. Before I get started with the CAF on this document, would like to make a couple of brief statements. One of them is that this is the third apartment complex program that we've had this year that has had a rather large outpouring of the public attended. At 2 of those previous meetings, we've had neighborhood meetings prior to those public hearing events, and in this one we did not. We did have a neighborhood hearing just a week ago at the request of the applicant, and we invited the people that were in the notification zone to attend. Those and several other people attended also from the neighborhood. But as a result of those conversations that evening and previous conversations that we've had in the 2 previous large meetings, we've decided to adopt as basically a policy in our department that from now on, whenever we have a rezoning request, at least in the residential areas, in the residential area, that we would have some type of neighborhood meeting for the neighborhood to talk and have a direct contact with the applicant somewhere between, there's a 66-day process, so somewhere after the conception of the project and the first round of comments are made is when most of the decisions and most of the code requirements are reviewed by staff and recommendations made by staff to the applicant. So sometime in that time frame, we would be hosting a neighborhood meeting and have the presentation by the applicant to the neighborhood so that there would be time for direct input from the neighborhood during the conceptual stage while things are still being formulated and while things are still being reviewed, and the applicant had an appropriate amount of time to make changes if they so desired in their plans based on those comments and that time period. And that then hopefully would give the public a better feel for how these projects come into being and how the applicant can have input from them and to make his decisions and how he wants to proceed. So we just wanted to make you aware that that's something that we'll be doing in the future. It's not a requirement of code. It's not a requirement of this council at any point in time, but it is something that we think will be a positive aspect both for the developer and for the general public at large for the city. So based on that, what we're here tonight is to review the application Z-1903 and PDP 1903, a rezoning and preliminary development plan for parcels ID CP 945-00000 space 0 TOC and CP 945-00000 space 0 TOD, and preliminary development plan dated July 1st, 2019, and a staff report dated July 23rd, 2019, and the Planning Commission's recommendations attached thereto. You have been given that rather long, lengthy staff recommendation and the minutes from that meeting. You've also been given a copy of the protest petition from that meeting that followed up and the results of that protest petition. There are a number of items that have been brought to the attention of the developer. He did have some conversation with the people in the neighborhood meeting, but the current the current effect of what we have before you is that the recommendation from the Planning Commission is to pass it as approved for an RP, a change from RP4 and R3 to RP3. Now, what may be of concern is that there's some definitional aspects of change that you might want to touch upon here just going forward. The RP4 is a new mixed-use designation that was created approximately a year and a half ago, and the Cottages University Park, which was the current land use design code, was the first applicant to ever try and use that zoning. And so he had changed the zoning that was previously there from 2003 to the RP4 zoning for the northern 2/3 of the land property that's in change for zoning tonight. And along with that, he changed the remaining back to an R3. And the reason for that is he felt it gave him the density factors, which is what the RP4 is designed to do, is to give you a higher density usage level on the property with using smaller lot sizes and allowing for more buildings to be built more closely together. The RP3 designation that has been brought forth for tonight is a delineation of the R3. So in other words, its base is R3. RP3 simply means it's planned. It means that it comes forward to you with a set plan of design and a criteria for that plan to be put into place and to be built on. The RP4 that was previous was also a planned unit, and so therefore it had a plan attached to it. And so the reason for the zoning change is that you have to change the plan. So in effect, when you're changing the zoning at this point in time, you're also adopting the new plan, which is the reason for the zone change. Some people, I think, have some misunderstandings that the zone change is to allow for the apartments. Well, that's true. It's to allow for the rezoning of the property to adopt the new planned units, which are all apartments. The previous plan, without the planned zoning, delineates you can only build what's in the previous plan. So that's why you have a change of plan adopted with a zoning change. Any questions on that? It's rather complicated in length, but not really in thought. Okay, so basically that's the presentation for that. I do have some maps if you need to have those brought up on the screen.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We may need those maps, Larry, so don't go too far. We do have we have Larry from the planning department here. We also have the applicant who's here as well. I'm going to open up the floor for public comments. I'm going to set a couple of ground rules here. Hopefully, it will make things go a little bit more smoothly. First of all, we were running under the same 5-minute limitation that we normally do on public comments. There's a clock over here on the left-hand side. It's going to count down to 0. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record. No profanity, no personal attacks, and if you could please try to bring something new to the conversation. I know that there's a lot of common issues that people have, but we want to be able to make sure that if we're touching on something that hasn't been touched on in previous hearings or discussions, we'd like to be able to hear it. We want to make sure that everybody who wants to be heard gets heard, but please try to bring something that hasn't been brought before, either in the public hearing period for the Planning Commission or during the neighborhood meeting. With that being said, I will open up the floor. Please state your name and address for the record coming forward, and again, no profanity, no personal attacks. The floor is open.
Jake Williams, 16259 Blair Court. We as a community come forward today to say that we oppose the Tallgrass apartment plan. Most of us here tonight have been involved with this proposal since the planning meeting a few weeks back. In that relatively short amount of time, we have discovered a lot of information showing that this plan will not only negatively affect our community, but potentially residents of the community and our city as well. First thing that I'd like to bring up is schooling. It's been a hot topic in Gardner for quite some time, and every time it's brought up, you get a different answer. One thing that stays consistent, our schools are reaching capacity and are in some cases full. There's no denying that a 600 apartment units will bring more children to Gardner and effectively put the only school that is full on the north side of town over capacity. Therefore, there are really only two options at this point that are available: either build another school or move the boundaries. Both of which will affect everyone in the city. If we build another school, there will need to be tax dollars to fund this project. We have been told by our superintendent that if we move boundaries, there is no money left in the budget for busing as it stands right now. This has the potential to financially impact the vast majority of families in Gardner because they have to start paying for their children to ride the bus. The second thing that I would like to touch on is our investments as homeowners. As a community, we're over 100 residents strong, and we've invested well over $25 million both in our dwellings and the city both. With these numbers, I feel we have a very loud voice among you as our city elected officials. I've heard several times that there is no proof that apartments can negatively impact the values of our home, but I've yet to find any information sustaining that claim. I just want to paint a picture for you. You go into a home or a duplex for sale in our community, you see a beautiful hardwood floors, granite countertops, and cabinetry. Then you look out the back door, and within 50 feet of your property line, you see a 16-unit building in your direct line of sight, blocking out your best view of the skyline. Tell me, would you buy that home? No, I don't believe you would. I built my home next to a proposed community of luxury duplexes. I would have never done so knowing that apartments were the plan for this property. Third, I've heard a few times that this is his property and he can do with it what he wants. Well, according to the developer himself, he does not yet own this property. This land is still owned by Cottage Park LLC and Blue Valley Investment Corporation. I do not feel that the developer and the city staff went about this plan in a professional manner. It has been effectively pushed down our throats for quick approval. We were only given a 2-day notice by letter in the mail and by a public sign that was posted at a dead-end road 8 feet back in the middle of tall weeds. We also found it discouraging when we heard that the developer had sat down with the residents of 3 homes on Moonlight Road, and he was also planning to sit down with council members. He did not decide to schedule a meeting with us until he had been asked by council members if he had reached out to the residents of Copper Springs or the duplexes. When questioned about that, he said that he had talked with Mr. Martins and assumed that he was the voice of Copper Springs in its entirety, even though that's not the case. Be that as it may, he has still never attempted to reach out to the residents of the duplexes until that point. I'm sure he will get up here and tell you that he had asked staff prior to the planning meeting if there were any concerns regarding this plan. It has been said that there were only 2, but it's hard to have concerns about a plan that you did not know exists. You will hear from several more residents tonight, and I'm confident it will become very apparent that we do not feel these apartments are right for our city or this location. So in closing, we strongly believe that this plan has been brought forth with no regard to the entire community, and it will have a negative impact on us. When the developer was asked if he would be willing to change these plans, he without hesitation stated no. Because the fact is, he is not emotionally or physically invested in this neighborhood, community, or city. He is simply presenting a plan of how he can make a quick dollar, and those who stand to lose are the folks that stand behind me. Thank you.
Hi, my name is George Rifford. I'm at 28604 West 162nd Place here in Gardner, Kansas. Thank you for your time this evening. I would like to spend a few minutes discussing some of our concerns regarding this parcel of land and the proposed rezoning and development. As mentioned by Jake, we as a community come forward opposing this particular development. We are not opposed to development in general. We actually are looking forward to development of this parcel as long as it meets the needs of all residents in the city of Gardner. We do not believe that proper due diligence was performed for this particular development, so we oppose this particular development. I would like to first touch on the fact that there appears to be a natural spring located at the northwest corner of this parcel. If you overlay Mr. Bleakley, the developer's plan, on top of the map of the land, you will find that the lat long of this natural spring is directly underneath where the developer intends to build. It's my understanding that an environmental impact study is not required by the city of Gardner for any development, and it's also my understanding that an environmental impact study was not completed. During last week Thursday's community meeting at the senior center with the developer, he was asked if he was willing to make any concessions to its current plan. His answer was no. I find it highly unconscionable that the developer nor the city of Gardner is not concerned about any potential downstream impacts of compromising this natural spring. For your edification, environmental degradation is the deterioration of environment through depletion of resources such as air, soil, and water. Environmental degradation comes in many types. One major component of environmental degradation is the depletion of a resource of fresh water on the earth. Approximately 2.5% of all of our water on the earth is fresh water. If I may approach, I would like to share some pictures. Is that okay?
Please.
Anybody else? I apologize. Thank you. At the surface, this natural spring does not look large. However, without an environmental impact study, how do we know what remains under the surface? By compromising the natural spring, heavy rainfall events would be carrying more sediment and contaminants down to Gardner Lake, possibly causing infilling and algae blooms. Not to mention, we need to have a better understanding of what will be continuing into the headwaters of the Kill Creek watershed for not only the citizens of Gardner, but for other communities downstream. In short, compromising this natural spring could negate the developer's stormwater study and create unforeseen issues downstream unless an environmental impact study is assessed on this natural spring. In addition, compromising this natural water source could also complicate water eradication from current and future dwellings during heavy downpours. As mentioned above, I find it disturbing that as it stands, the Gardner City Administration and City Planning Commission is willing to set a precedent and allow for such development without a better understanding of any negative downstream impacts from compromising this natural spring. An environmental impact study would help us better understand the overall size of this natural spring and any potential impact of its compromise. I'd also like to point out the location of this development. It is my understanding that per the City of Gardner's master plan, developments like this should also include some amenities, say a gas station, grocery, healthcare, whatever it may be, within close proximity of the residents. This does not appear to be in the developer's plan either. The closest amenity is a Casey's gas station, which is approximately 1 mile from this development. I really feel for these residents as they are being put on an island with nothing around them to do or reach. The developer's other properties in Olathe have amenities within a quarter mile of each location, which includes a Whole Foods, a Target, and a Chick-fil-A. It's my opinion that this project does not fall within the guidelines of Gardner's master plan as well, and perhaps a mixed-use retail residential development such as the Waverly Place proposal would be a much better solution. I would also like to insert some comments from our neighbors to the south at the Craig Brett duplex complex. Some of their concerns with the retention basin is if something goes wrong, such as a drain pipe gets clogged, for example, and their basements flood, who is liable for these damages? Other concerns are the traffic flow coming off of University Drive onto 164th, then taking a left and another right to get into the complex. In addition, these people down in the Craig Brett duplexes were told that villas would be built within 3 years. The villas would have a pool and an HOA. They were also told that they would have an opportunity to join that HOA. They would have never purchased. They purchased their place because of that promise. They would have never purchased it if they were told there would be a possibility of apartments being built. In closing, I would like to mention that the 4 fundamentals of effective and efficient project management are plan, do, check, act. From my perspective, this development plan only touches on the first 2 fundamentals and rejects the check, act fundamentals, most importantly with the absence of an environmental impact study. In layman's terms, as a young boy,
Sorry, must
thank you.
stop for 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Elisa Coinson, and I live at 16431 Blair Street in the duplexes that Craig Brett built. So as George was talking about those units, he does not live there, but I do live there, and I've talked to lots of people on the street that live there, and we all have the same consensus that when this apartment complex was proposed, it will be directly in our backyard. So when I moved there, when I purchased the duplex, I purchased it directly from Craig Brett without a realtor. And it was very important for me to build my home as a forever home because I have multiple sclerosis. I needed to be on a single level. I needed it small enough for me to be able to maintain, and I needed it to be zero entry. So I worked with them so I could have everything that I needed so I was never gonna have to move again. But before I signed the contract, I said, I wanna know what's gonna be in my backyard. And they said, well, it's gonna be these luxury villas, and in fact, we can't, there'll be a walking path right behind you because we can't build on that because there's a natural, they told me creek, not spring, but they said there was a natural creek that ran past there, so they were gonna put a walking path back there, which I was okay with. I thought that would be nice. It was a nice buffer between the patio homes, the luxury patio homes that they were going to build. So I was told in a face-to-face meeting with Craig and Brett present that that's what that was going to be. And they, in fact, rolled out the plans for me in a big roll and said, here's the plat. Because I said, where's the pool going to be? Because I don't want the pool in my backyard. And they said, oh, here's where the pool's going to be. No worries, nowhere close to your backyard. So you're all good. We'll be building these in the next 3 years. It's going to have an HOA. It's going to have a pool and a clubhouse, and you guys will all be invited to join this HOA. So, you know, if I put my glasses on, I could see a little bit better. That's when I asked where the club and the pool house would be, and they showed it to me. And the walking trail. So I'm a single person. I moved to Gardner because of the small town. I grew up in a town of 800 people. I loved the fact that it was a cornfield because I grew up with the cornfield in my backyard. But I knew that it wasn't going to stay a cornfield. I'm not naive. It's going to be developed. But it was nice to know what was going to be there. I think the master plan for the city of Gardner is to have more transitional housing for people to age in place. Apartments are not age in place places. So for people like me, I need to be in a place that I can age in place because I don't know from day to day what my medical status is going to be. With MS, it can be tomorrow morning I can wake up and not be able to walk, which is why it was important for me to build here where I knew that all of those needs were taken care of. I was not planning on sharing my backyard with 596 apartments with 16 units staring into my back window when I look out. I just really hope that you all listen to what we have to say and take into consideration our feelings in this matter. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Alyssa.
Brian Keeney, 28605 West 162nd Place. I'm going to bring the law enforcement perspective in this a little bit. I'm a police officer in Lenexa, Kansas. I'm going to talk about the public safety aspect as well as traffic logistics. The developer first stated the other day in our meeting that he had talked to both the chief of the fire department, Hawley, and Chief Belcher, and he said that both of them said that absolutely this apartment complex is going to be no issues at all, none at all. He even said that Chief Belcher told him that there would be no more crime with this apartment complex coming than if this apartment complex wasn't there. Being in law enforcement, I can almost guarantee you the chief, the chief couldn't say that. There's no foresight in this as far as he doesn't read the future. The biggest thing is you bring any large amount of additional housing in, no matter what style, population goes up, Crime goes up, calls for service goes up. It's fact. It happens everywhere in Lenexa. It happens in Olathe. It happens in Overland Park. It's going to happen in Gardner. I ran the calls for service in the last 3 months for all the Gardner apartment complexes. In those Gardner apartment complexes for the last 3 months, 178 calls for service were ran. Not surprisingly, the two largest complexes, the Reserve at Moonlight, which has 294 apartment units, and Aspen Place with 188, both topped out as the two highest call loads. Tallgrass has wanted to bring in 592 units, more than both of those combined. All right. And it'll be the largest complex in Gardner by twice the number of units. When I also looked at the same call loads for single-family residences in those same areas, it was drastically decreased. Not because of the apartment complexes, because single-family units bring in less crime. I'm not saying that what this tenant's going to bring in is going to be criminals, but you put population in a close area, you bring in 592 units, possibly 700 to 1,000 additional residents in a 43-acre area, it's going to be natural. You're going to have additional crime come in. You can't help it. There's no way about it. I'm not saying he's going to bring in bad people. I'm just saying it's the natural ebb and flow of things. That's what's going to happen. When I did talk to both chiefs, Chief Belcher and Chief Hawley, they did agree on one thing. They're worried about the parking. If there's parking on the streets, it could conflict with them trying to get their units in there. Fire trucks, ambulances, and police cars need to get close to the scene so they can help and do whatever they need to do to take care of business. All right. So when you look at what the developer says, he said there's going to be 1.4 parking spots per complex or per unit. When you do the math on that, that gives you 829 parking stalls. If only 75% of the people, once this complex is complete, has 2 cars, which most people will have 2 cars, it's America, that means that it's a total of 888 cars. You've already over-limited yourself on what your parking stalls are capable of. All right, that puts them on the street. I got the traffic study that the developer proposed and had that company do. In that traffic study, they mentioned in quotes, the parking on the residential streets in front of the apartment units will serve to prevent cut-through traffic and slow vehicles. This is exactly what the fire department and police department worry about, parking on the residential streets. And that's in the traffic study. So that's one of our concerns is how much due diligence was actually done. Was this traffic study read before it was approved and signed off on? Manpower issues. Being in law enforcement, I'm gonna tell you right now, we can never have enough people. Fire department's the same way. You never have enough people no matter what's going on. All right. By a potential of 1,000 or more residents, do we have enough to serve the community the way they would like with the fire department and everything else? Are we going to have to rely on mutual aid for the fire department? The closest one there is New Century. Okay, so that's going to be an issue also. So, do we have enough people to serve and protect on the police department and on the fire department on the Johnson County side? That's just something to think about. The intersection of Moonlight and University with the traffic study I'd like to get into real quick. Holy crap, you guys don't give enough time at all. Sorry. So from May 14th, 2019, from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., 608 vehicles drove through this intersection of Moonlight and University. The PM section, 667 vehicles drove through. That's in a 2-hour block of one day. All right. That seems like a lot of cars. In 2018, the same thing was done. 494 cars in the AM, 644 in the PM. So just in 1 year, it's already gone up by about 150 cars in that area, okay? They estimate, this is the traffic study again, that 853 cars in the AM, 940 cars in the PM in a 2-hour period. So, I mean, we're looking at great numbers here. Currently, between 3,500 and 4,000 vehicles are going through the intersection every day of Moonlight University. We did a study of our own through a traffic engineer. I'm not going to have enough time. This is crap. I'm sorry. I'm trying.
That's all right. What we can do is we can take your comments and we can put them in the record. I believe that
I've got about 1 more minute to go. Is there a chance I could come up for 1 more minute later on?
I give you 30 seconds.
Give me 30 seconds. Watch how fast I read. Apartments and townhomes make an average of 7 trips per day per unit. Multiply that by 592 units, you get an additional 4,130 trips per day. Single-family homes make an average of 10 trips per day. If Copper Strings bills the 200 houses plus, if they're looking at doing this, 2,000 more trips. You're going to average 10,000 more trips per day in this intersection, all right? Even the traffic study completed was 13,000 cars are going through this intersection once this unit was put in. Our roads are crap there already. They're terrible. We don't have a traffic light. That's my last thing I want to really talk about. There's no proposed traffic light for this area, and everybody else does have a traffic light, so who's going to pay for that? So I just want you guys to look at are you guys ready to make that decision for traffic lights, for additional manpower, things like that? So my last sentence right here. Where's that? Thank you for your time and consideration in this matter. With the amount of the traffic to be increased and the increase in service calls, and the unforeseen cost of the city for traffic signals and the hiring of additional officers, we believe a no vote is warranted and changes can be made to the current plan. We as residents aren't saying don't bring in apartments. We're just asking that project is done smartly with both sides having to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Damn.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm gonna lower this so I don't have to get on my tippy toes. My name is Lydia Kepler. I live at 16255 Blair Court. Let me just get right started. I will say I did send emails out to all the council members. I know Mr. Mountain just responded back about 3 minutes before the meeting started, so I have no idea what you wrote. So I'm going over my points anyway. My first concern is the significant density change. This land was zoned for an R3, RP4, which is for more medium density garden apartments and condominiums. When buying in Copper Springs, I knew this going in, just like as any property owner would. I knew it was going to be for multi-family homes. According to the Gardner Comprehensive Plan, medium density is considered areas that typically have single-family attached homes that are examples of duplexes, triplexes, and townhomes. And it does specifically say in it that it is attached horizontally, that those are for the attached homes. This current plan is not, I don't believe is appropriate for this rezoning. As an R3, we do actually have a more appropriate zoning, which is R5, that specifically calls for apartments. It also, for R5, it talks, when it gives the example of what a high-density apartment would look like, it states, defined as structures that contain multiple units, usually stacked vertically and attached horizontally, typically with common hallways and amenities, which sounds like exactly what these 16 to 24 unit buildings are talking about, or are being proposed. Okay, so I lost my place. So I do believe the multifamily housing phrase has just been being utilized on both R3 and R5. I understand that, but I do think we need to be a little bit more specific with the zoning there and look at what the definitions are asking for. Because I do think that this one, I'm gonna go off, I need to go on. Okay, through the process, I've learned a lot and do realize that apartments as well as single family housing, there's a big shortage we have here in Gardner. I've also learned about the need for more transitional housing for retirees and empty nesters that prefer to stay rooted here in their community. I understand the need for developers here, but we also need quality and appropriate developing to better our city for the long haul, not the quick dollar, and provide development for all residents, including the property owners that have already invested our money, our time, and our children to the city. Property owners' rights, meeting with all the council members at one point in the last 2 weeks, I have a much clearer picture of what the rights of a property owner are. As stated above, I asked and was informed that approved zoning for the lot directly behind my house, and I knew that going in. I still made the choice to buy my home. This developer was also made aware prior to working on buying this land, which is why it's in contingency based on this. But he also knew what it was already zoned for. The city would not have to tell him what his homes look like, or where to pour his driveways, or where to plant every tree. However, the type of home for this area has already been voted on. We can tell the developer what doesn't work with our already zoned areas. And he does have the responsibility, and he's got the responsibility of knowing what those regulations are prior to his purchase. These are the regulations that both ensure the growth for the developer as well as for our own city. I'm concerned about our property value. I've read several articles throughout the last few weeks determining if apartments increase or decrease the surrounding home values. Most say bottom line is no. In 5 years, my property should still, based outside of market value, still pay out what it's worth today. That being said, all articles did indicate the value change is not noted on the amount, but actually on the time, because I am now going to have to find the appropriate one buyer that doesn't mind looking at a building that's this large behind our backyard. It may only be 2 stories high, but it will continue to be 8 to 10 apartments wide, which is about 30 to 53 feet wide based on their plan. Currently, the approved housing ranges from 15 to 25-foot wide buildings, encouraging more of a neighborhood feel over the apartment complex. This will be a significant change to our backyard view, and rather than selling in a month, it may take 6 or 8 months. That is where, so the depreciation dollar may not necessarily be seen in the reports, but I do believe that the community property values will be affected in other ways. I did have a question. We were told by a couple of council members that we could ask tonight if the funding had been reviewed and that bonds have been received. So I'll just throw that question out there. My understanding is by tonight before the vote, we were told we could ask and be provided information to ensure that they were set prior to the voting. So I'm just throwing that out there. I do want to say, Larry, thank you very much for the idea of having mandatory the neighborhood meetings. It would be huge. Dang it!
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you, Lydia. I appreciate your time. Thank you. And whoever has stuff that they want to be able to add, if they want to add it to the public record, please feel free to take your notes and you can give them over to our city clerk and she can add those added. All right? So, just letting you know. Yes.
Will those be looked at before the vote?
Well, not all the notes are going to be available to us, no, but we will go based on the public comments. My apologies. Yes, hi.
Anthony Kobler, 28313 West 162nd Terrace. Mr. Mayor, Councilman, thank you for the opportunity and privilege to speak with you this evening. As many others have spoken tonight, I'm sure many others will, there are a multitude of concerns myself and my community have regarding this project as currently outlined and presented. It is important to note that not a single soul here tonight is under the illusion this land will not be developed, and likely developed in a way which is different from what was planned even just a few short months ago. What is concerning to myself and all those here tonight is there seems to be little thought as to how this is going to affect the current neighborhoods in regards to safety, traffic, and future needs of our little section of Gardner. That's my biggest concern, is safety for my 5 and 2-year-old daughters. And it's a lot of the reason why we chose to live in Gardner, not Olathe, not Overland Park, not any other cities, is because of the small town feel that we have here. To date, there have been no indications that the city is prepared for such a rapid increase in the amount of people we place in such a small area. Under this current plan, West 162nd Terrace, the street that I live on, appears will become a major thoroughfare through the Copper Springs subdivision. Essentially, that will be where all the traffic of the subdivision will divert down once it's connected to Moonlight. This will significantly increase the traffic on the street, which is not designed for such use. Currently, our children have the ability to ride their bikes up and down the street without the concern of constant traffic, almost hearkening back to the free-range days where kids had freedom to explore and grow. The way the current plan is set up, this will strip them almost entirely of their ability to do so. Additionally, the proposed developer, Mr. Bleakley, has shown no qualms that he is strictly a businessman. Every meeting I have attended this far has shown he is most concerned with his business, which I cannot say I entirely fault him. He has seen this piece of land and he has developed a plan to maximize his profit to every square inch, ignoring most or all of our concerns. He has been asked if he'd be willing to work with the current community and homeowners to develop something which would make him and the proposed residents a part of our community. At every turn he stated no, or he stated that he's tried to talk to the community, but Phil Martins wouldn't speak to him. Mr. Bleakley has essentially shirked any responsibility to the community at every opportunity, and likely will continue to do so. What Mr. Bleakley is seemingly unaware of is this is Gardner. It is not the much larger cities of Olathe, Overland Park, or any of the other suburban communities near here. This is a town with big city amenities and a small town feel, where everyone knows everyone and we all watch out for one another. This is where we care about our high school athletics, our local dance studios, our Major League Baseball players, our fireworks on the 4th of July, and our neighborhoods. Mr. Bleakley and his plan do not care what's best for the residents of his proposed community, the surrounding neighborhoods, but most importantly, he doesn't seem to care what's best for the city of Gardner. Finally, you gentlemen make up our city council. We ask that you continue to lead this community responsibly and respectfully, and to continue to uphold the values which make this community so different from every other city in this area. We believe you have an opportunity to show this community that you care about those who are already here, who decided to purchase their homes here, and to make the best of their lives here. You have an opportunity to show that all landowners and citizens of this town have just as much, if not more, of a say in what happens in this town,
rather than the big developers who only concerns with their bottom lines. Mostly, sirs, I ask you give this plan the due consideration it deserves, and I would ask that you consider if this plan truly represents the values of this community, one in which we care about our neighbors and how the decisions we make impact everyone for the betterment of us all. I respectfully request you vote no on this measure, and let's work together to ensure this land is respectfully developed for the betterment of all of Gardner and its citizens. I appreciate all of your time tonight. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. John Duggan, 9101 West 110th Street, Suite 200, here for Martin's Family Enterprises. One of the things I want to touch on first is I think there's really some technical issues about whether or not there's even really a valid application pending before you. The reason that we've come to this conclusion is in part after the Planning Commission meeting, we asked the city staff through a Kansas Open Records request for all the data that was in their file, and we come to find out that the application was actually filled out in the name of Mr. Blakely. But Kansas state law and your own city ordinances require that the application be in the name of the property owner, which is Cottage Park LLC. In fact, the affidavit of ownership that was attached to the application says that Wincroft Hill Apartments LLC is the owner of the property, when in fact they're not. There's not one piece of paper in the city's files that indicates that Cottage Park LLC authorized anyone to proceed forward with a rezoning application of the land that they own, which would violate the state statutes and violate your own ordinances, and in fact would be inconsistent with the form application that is on the city's website. The second, and that may be for a reason. The reason may be that Cottage Park LLC didn't want to put their name on a piece of paper that said they wanted this property rezoned, because a little over a year ago, Cottage Park LLC came to the city and made representations at a public hearing. And in those representations, they were specifically asked, when they got the RP3 and RP4 approval, they were specifically asked, would these duplexes that you want to build and the fourplexes that you want to build in the single family, would they be rentals? Because there's opposition to those being rentals. And their representatives at the hearing unequivocally said none of the property that was subject to the RP3 or RP4 would ever be rentals. That was the representation they made to get you and the Planning Commission to approve it. And they made the same representations, it appears, to a number of the property owners to induce them to buy some of these duplexes. Well, now obviously there's an application, and nobody from that group of people or their representatives seemingly have presented anything in writing that suggests they're in favor of this, and that may be a mitigation strategy to limit their exposure for damages. I don't know, but there's nothing before you that complies with your ordinances. The second thing that's troubling is when we asked the city for its file, they couldn't provide or didn't provide us, even though we asked for it, photocopies of the envelopes or the postage marks for the dates that the letters went out, because state law requires all of those mailed notices to be out 20 days in advance. There's a form letter that says, "Dear property owner," and it's dated July 2nd, but we've heard from a number of people that they got it the day before the July 23 hearing or 2 days before, and some people saying I never got it at all, and the only way I found out about it was on Facebook. Typically, you would want, if you were going to validate that process, keep photocopies of the envelopes with the postage marks on them, or return receipt requested documents that showed when they went out. We have none of that evidence that suggests that this actually went out 20 days before the July 23 hearing. It's hard to believe that the post office was that ineffective that they didn't get them mailed out and didn't get them delivered to people within the 20-day time period. The other thing that's important, I think, to note here is that I think the planning staff has come to the conclusion, like everybody else did, that the neighborhood meeting was incredibly important because it gave the developer a feedback loop with some of the concerns of the residents. The staff recommended approval to the Planning Commission, and they went through the golden factors, and one of those golden factors was, what's the impact on the adjoining property owners? Obviously, the staff didn't have the feedback from the adjoining property owners. They didn't hear what they had to say, and they didn't hear about the representations that were made to them about a pool, about a homes association, about no rental units behind their houses, all of which, by the way, are public record in the city of Gardner's minutes of the 2018 February 27 meeting, where the developer made all those statements on the record. Well, obviously, those people that bought those duplexes are going to be adversely impacted by not being performed on the assurance there'd be no rentals behind their house, by not getting a pool, and by not getting a walking trail, and not getting an HOA. There's a significant adverse impact on adjoining property owners. I don't have enough time to go through all the details, but I think that covers the general points that we wanted to cover about, I think there's some defects in what we're doing, and there certainly is an adverse impact on adjoining property owners. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Todd Blakely, and I'm joined here tonight by Tony Yodrich, our properties manager, Todd Allenbrand with Payne and Brockway Civil Engineers, Pete Heaven, who's here to answer your legal questions, and I think he does have some comments to make, and Bob Montgomery with Montgomery and Company Real Estate. The plan before you tonight is the product of a 4-month collaborative effort between ourselves, our civil engineers, and your excellent planning staff. The plan has been thoroughly vetted by your staff, and their staff report recommends approval. On July 23rd, the Planning Commission voted to approve the plan. During our due diligence, we reached out to those disciplines whose job it is to protect and serve not only those who would live in Tallgrass, but our surrounding neighbors. We met with the school district, the police department, and the fire department, none of which had any issues or expressed any concerns to us about the proposed Tallgrass apartments. I also want to interject here that I never told anyone there would not be any crime associated with our project. Of course, there's going to be crime that comes in with any time you build any kind of an apartment property or the property that was already approved for this site. What we talked to the police department about was, did they have concerns that the apartment community would bring inordinate amount of crime? And the answer was no. We provided a traffic impact study performed by a licensed traffic engineer that shows an adequate level of service upon the completion of the entire development, not just phases 1 or 2, but the entire development. We provided a value impact study that concludes there would be no measurable impact on the value of surrounding single-family homes. In short, we believe we have met or exceeded every requirement and expectation put to us by the staff and your development review process. This plan has been worked and reworked over the last 4 months, and we believe it is an excellent plan. And I would like to respond to this comment from some of the neighbors that I said no in the neighborhood meeting last week. And that is in response to a meeting we had about 2 weeks ago where we met with Phil Martins, his attorney John Duggan, and Phil's daughter Melissa Irish. As a result of that meeting, we came up with 4 things that we would consider amending, 4 ways we would consider amending our plan. We submitted those to Phil, and those were rejected. Without any dialogue between ourselves and Mr. Martins, there's no way we're going to change our plan. Those options are still on the table. We will still commit to those, even though Mr. Martins rejected them. Of everything that excites us about Gardner and about your community, and we do think this is an exciting time in your future, one comment stands out. That's the simple declaration made several years ago that Gardner is open for business. And this is why we're here tonight. We are ready to bring our business to your community, and we hope that you give us that opportunity. We want to thank you for your time, the consideration you've given our application. We want to again thank the city staff for all their time and effort, and we're anxious to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. My name is Pete Heaven. I'm an attorney with Spencer Fain, and my address is 9401 Indian Creek Parkway in Overland Park. I've represented the Blakely family for about 30 years and have gone through the trenches with them on many of their projects, most importantly, the two projects they have in Olathe. And I'll talk about that in just a moment, but I do want to dispel one bit of confusion that perhaps Mr. Duggan brought up a moment ago when he said that the application was in the name of Wincroft Apartments and not the fee owner of the property. If you look at the application, it clearly discloses that Wincroft Apartments is the contract purchaser. There's no representation made that it's the owner. And it's very common for these types of things to be, the applications to be done by the contract purchaser. And I wish Mr. Duggan had picked up the phone and called me, because the contract between Cottage Park and Wincroft even states that the Blakeleys can make an application for the rezoning. So there's no attempt to hide anything here. I don't doubt the sincerity of the folks you've heard from tonight. I agree with them in many respects. Lack of information causes concern, it causes anger, it causes nervousness. We're not sure what the group has been told in years past. But what we do know is that since 2003, this property has been zoned as multifamily. It's a given. And for the past 16 years, nothing's been done with the property, but the zoning has remained multifamily. Zoning is just the permission to do something. It's not a promise to do it. And we've all seen this. In 2008, virtually every development in Kansas City came to a halt and most failed. Well, were people sued because they broke their promises to build houses or apartments or swimming pools? Of course not. Market changes, people change, financing changes. But I think the most important thing to point out in this matter is the density is not an issue and should not be. We hear from people saying it's going to be very dense because of all these apartments, all these people. The reality is that the density of this project is 13.75. Duplex zoning in the city of Gardner is a density from 12 to 15. So we actually have duplex density, but we're using apartments. So these things are just to help the people understand where we are. The current apartment dweller is there by choice and not by necessity. When I was growing up, I couldn't afford a house, so I lived in an apartment. Now young people can afford it and choose to live in an apartment where they can lock and leave. There's no maintenance. And when you're talking about $1,000 a month, that's a lot of money for an apartment. But people do that because they want to live in Gardner. They choose apartment living as opposed to living in a single family home. With the Blakeleys, you're going to get the best. For 50 years, they've been doing this. On-site management, on-site supervision, maintenance. If this were all duplexes, do you think there'd be common maintenance? Probably not. With these buildings, there will be. So in sum, I think Gardner can be proud of this product. And I hope you've all taken a look at Todd's apartment complexes in Olathe. Well-run, beautiful, and they have people who want to live there as opposed to have to live there. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Pete.
Hello, my name is Michael Kane. I live at 28318 West 162nd Street, Gardner, Kansas. I would like to go over a couple things really briefly. In our meetings when we've talked, Mr. Blakely did express that rent would actually start at $800 a month, not $1,000. $1,000 was on the high end for the 2 bedrooms. Secondly, I'm a little bit disappointed, but I'm glad that you guys are taking the time to listen to us, because Mr. Blakely apparently is only willing to talk to and listen to Mr. Martins and not the surrounding community. You are our voice. He said, without a doubt, in the meetings, he would not change the plan. He didn't say he wouldn't change it because Phil wouldn't talk to him. He said he wouldn't change the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Phil Martins, Martins Family Enterprises, 19,000 West 158th Street, Olathe, Kansas. My name's been brought up a couple times. I am the developer and builder to most of the people in the room. Not all, but basically started Copper Springs with 10-foot weeds and an impassable road, and basically turned it completely around. And there's a need for single-family homes in Gardner, and I think we're the only one doing anything of major numbers. And most of it's very small numbers, and a lot of them are even rental properties on the single families that are being built. The problem is buffering. Bottom line is buffering. You don't put apartments next to single family homes. How easy is that? The first plan that was in 2003 had duplexes, no problem. Right up against that, that's why I bought the extra 60 acres to continue Copper Spring and make it a nice house, affordable house, and clear up to, we're building clear up to 450 in there. So some of these houses that are on the bigger lots go smack dab right up in the middle of his 16 unit apartments. Well, at first we had four 16-foot buildings that were going to be up there. So we have basically Phil did meet. The problem was the offer was still luxury $800 a month apartments next to some of my single family homes that probably pay for, around over $2,000, $2,400 a month normal payment. So there's a little bit of a problem there. So the big deal is, we've talked to Todd, and we got him down to 316 buildings. But problem is that still I wouldn't have bought the property to the north and continued Copper Springs versus if I known that they were going to come in and completely change the plan from the duplexes that were originally there, or even the plan that was approved just a little over a year ago. The density on that, 4.7. Density is a factor. He just said duplexes and everything else, with 13.75 is what the apartments are going to be. Now, how does that go from 220 units that were approved just last year, and now they're over 560, or let's say 560 units now? So density is a factor. I don't know where the math is on that, but 1375 is a lot different than 4.7 that were there. And the plan that was approved in 2018, guess what? Nobody was in this audience from Copper Springs. Nobody. I wasn't there. I wasn't affected. I thought it was a great plan. If they're going to do it, great. They're going to have a pool, going to have a clubhouse, great. I didn't tell anybody, my deal is okay, this is what's going to happen here. But when it got changed to now, if we're going to get changed to this, we're railroading right into saying yes on a vote, that, there's other options to here. That we could send this back to planning, say, hey, let's work this out a little bit better. It's not that Phil Martins doesn't want to meet. Phil Martins doesn't want apartments up to single family. Simple as that. How hard is that? And the problem is with, he says, okay, well, I did meet with Todd. I don't build duplexes. Well, guess what? If you look on the plan, there's 2 lots. It's got to be duplexes. You know what? Build 10 more of them down on the street, down the street, and you could have the whole deal backed up to my single family. Not a problem. I'd be okay with the rest of the community. I still think it's crazy to go from 220 units to over 550 units. There will be traffic. You know that as well as I do. You're going to need a light there at 167th and Moonlight. It's going to be years before another road would have access to Moonlight through my property and through the apartments. If you see that right there on the north end, there's a little stub street there. It's supposed to go out to Moonlight. Well, that's our last phase of the preliminary plat will be coming in here in the next 2 or 3 months. I bet you $5 that you won't see near the people here, because I'm going to put in what's supposed to go in. I'm not going up against something that's, multifamily versus single family. I appreciate your time, and you don't have to vote yes. You can send it back to the planning and let's get this right. It's a big project, and everybody deserves that. So protect your people. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. else?
Hi there, I'm Jason Mullen, 28604 West 162nd Terrace. I would first like to thank you all for your time, really appreciate it. Secondly, I would like to thank Mr. Powell for seriously taking a look at the policies and procedures that are in place of notifying the citizens of this town. I commend him on that because I can stand up here and reiterate what my homeowners behind me have done the same thing. And I can listen to Todd and Phil bicker back and forth. But we as citizens should have been notified. It was not until we stressed concern that he decided to have a meeting with us. So I really think that we need to take a look at the whole procedural thing of things. So I really commend Mr. Powell on opening up with that. So, but we as citizens need to be thought of first. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Anyone else? Thank you very much this evening.
I do have one thing to say.
I'm sorry.
My name is Carmen Gardino. I live at 16415 Blair Street. I am a duplex owner. My duplex is right in front of the street, that 164th Street, that these cars are going to be turning in. And it's a little tiny blip of a street. They're going to come off of University, turn in there, and then they either have to take a left or a right. And my house is right there. So all of this traffic that's coming in, making noise, bringing in garbage, because some people like to throw things out of their windows, and coming through there, disregarding all the children that we have, I'm very concerned. I moved to Gardner, and I chose Gardner over many towns. I moved there November 15th, 2018. I fell in love with this little town. I like it here. I thought this is quiet, it's wonderful, it's peaceful. The residents, it's a family feeling that you get when you come here. And I loved it. And that's why my husband and I chose to move here. I am 56 years old. I am not buying another home. I'm moving to a wonderful small town, Gardner. And now I'm very concerned with what you're doing. Gardner's going to be called the city of apartments. I don't want to see a big building outside my windows. And there's not enough buffer. There really isn't. And then my home has the retention pond behind it. And so what do I have to put up with? All this water, the smell, the bugs. I can't even sit out there and enjoy my patio now because of this. I work hard, I come home, I want to come home to a quiet place. Now, Mr. Blakely, 2 weeks ago at that last meeting we had, said that they have quiet hours, 11 to 7. Well, I'd like to know how he came up with 11 to 7. I looked at many cities surrounding us. Overland Park is a huge city. Their quiet ordinance, noise ordinance, starts at 10 p.m. and it's 55 decibels. And that runs from 10 p.m. to 7 p.m. Now, I'm sure that you don't want these huge apartment buildings making all this noise, because you know what's going to happen? We're going to keep calling the police. And how could this lease say that the quiet hours are 11 to 7 when that didn't even take in consideration the city of Gardner's noise ordinance codes? And so are we even looking at this apartment's lease? Have we even looked at this lease? What is written in there that they're permitting these residents that come in, that pay such a low amount of money to live there? What are they allowing them to do on this property right behind me? I'm very sad. I'm angry. And if you put this in without really thinking this through, you're going to ruin your little town that I just so loved. That's why I chose to live here. please, send this back. Go through it, consider it. Don't put big buildings in there. You know, we need senior housing. Nobody said anything about that. Put senior housing there. Put smaller units there. The past plan was great. I was promised that we would have some villas behind us, that we could be a part of that association. Face to face, they lied to me, knowing why we were buying this home and why we were coming here. And I have to say that the person that lied to me owns a home right here in Gardner. Don't they care about their own kids growing here? Or it's all about the dollar? It's more to it than just money. This is going to really, down the road, you're going to have a lot of problems. And I hate to say this, it's not going to be good. Please, just look at this. Stop this project. Go over it. Take a good look at what you're doing to your town, to my town. I don't know how I'm going to sell. Who's going to buy my unit now? And I don't have another big down payment. How long is it going to take me to save up? Another 20% to go somewhere else, to find some quiet, nice little town. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. All right, anyone else? Okay. There was definitely some, thank you very much for, the civility of the discussion. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate that. Secondly, we will be probably looking at several of these. We've made a lot of notes here. I'm going to start with Councilman Baldwin. Do you have questions for staff or the applicant?
I have questions for staff and I have comments. Do you want me to just do questions right now?
Questions for now.
Okay. Do we have concerns from the application? Has it been reviewed and those comments addressed or investigated? Sorry, good morning.
It's my understanding that the applicant was properly notified and the application that we received was properly filled out and notarized by the people that had control of the property. Contractually, if the contractual agreement between a property owner, a purchaser, and an existing property owner in general isn't allowed to be an applicant when the property owner gives his consent for that application, which he did do in this case.
I know I've already asked you about the notification. We talked about it 2 weeks ago. Are we addressing that in some manner to make sure that that doesn't happen again, or if anything happened this time?
We mailed everything out on July 2nd. People that may not have received a notice may not have received one simply because they didn't live in the notification zone. They're mailed out to a 200-foot radius of the property, not the middle of the property, but from the edge of the property. So all the way around the property, 200 feet out, everything that's in the city, anybody that touched any tiny piece, you should have received a letter for the Planning Commission hearing for July. If you lived in the county, that legal limit is 1,000 feet, and so those people that are not inside the city limits that were notified lived within 1,000 feet of the property. We do not send out registered letters. We send out regular letters for that. There are 3 signs that were supposed to be posted on the property by the applicant. I've been told by some of the residents they only saw 1. And then we, of course, notify the public by putting the public hearing processes in the local newspaper. That's all done 20 days or 21 days prior to the public hearing, which is a state law requirement as far as mailing things out. Getting them there, we don't, like I said, we don't send a registered letter, and we don't make a copy of every letter envelope face that we send out prior to mailing them. But we do use the mailing list that Ames provides us, which is the legal ownership listing according to the county.
Okay, thank you. I have another question, but first I want to thank Larry and your staff. 2 weeks ago, I met with Larry and the staff, and after the concerns we had with Waverly Plaza and meeting with the homeowners, the suggestion to have the public meeting earlier in the process is what we discussed. That's what I brought up. So I am very pleased to see that that is going forward. I think that'll be beneficial in the future. It may not help everyone sitting here right now, but in the future. My last question is maybe for Michael, but do we have concerns about that natural spring? I know that an environmental study is not required, but have we looked at it for roads perspective, utilities, GONS? Do we have concerns?
You know, on the spring itself, I don't believe we've done any investigation ourselves. We do have the stormwater report that addresses not only stormwater detention, but also water quality issues. And that has been reviewed
and approved. Okay. Great. Those are my questions for now.
All right, thank you. Councilman Gregorczyk.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just gathering my thoughts here, because I really appreciate everybody showing up today. I think Phil Martin summed all of this up. And if you look at our master plan and you look at the transitional piece of that master plan, which would be single-family homes to duplexes to apartments, on the north end or in phase 3, that doesn't seem to meet that standard. So what I would move is that we would kick this back to Planning Commission and reevaluate this, reevaluate all the phases, which is a 3 to 5 year plan, and have the builders and the landowners come back after going back through that process.
Point of order, the motion to move is not on the table at this point. We still are doing question and answer, we're doing discussion, so I have to strike that.
I'll come back to that, thank you. Okay. The environmental study, which to Mark's point, I think is a concern, and it's a concern not today with what we see in front of us, but it's a concern whenever the northern road is built out in conjunction with Phil's development, the Copper Springs, and then tied back into the Moonlight. I think that's going to be an issue. We heard from the community that traffic is going to be an issue. So I'm very curious as to what and how we're going to handle that traffic. The next thing is I asked Todd with the developer, the apartment side, about the lease agreement, and I've not seen a copy of that lease agreement, nor is it in our pamphlets. But it's my understanding from our verbal conversation that they would check backgrounds, employment, verification, and credit checks. Is that still the case, Todd?
Yes, it is.
Thank you, sir. Again, I support the addition of the community touch that Mark spoke of. I know that I spoke to Todd at Ground House and suggested that he reach out to Michelle or Mr. Powell to coordinate that, and I'm glad that you guys did. But it's all about buffering for me. And I really feel, as I read RP5, that this is more of an RP5 neighborhood than an RP3. But I'm not a content expert. I'm just reading the black and white words on a sheet, and it seems to me that it's an RP5.
Is that a question you want to pose to
Yes,
staff here?
thank you.
Because that's, yeah, they're here to answer it.
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking for a definition of zoning for RP5 versus RP3, or are you just looking
Clarification.
for
I
clarification?
read both of them, Larry, but I still feel strongly that it's an RP5 versus what we have in front of us.
The land development code itself, our new land development code, when it was rewritten, actually thought about this somewhat and put into place a layered apartment complex definition. So if I may read the following for you. Apartments are permitted in use in R3 zoning, and the Gardner Land Development Code includes 3 apartment building types with varying amounts of required open space. This applicant, which is the one that's tonight I'm referring to, this applicant has chosen the least dense apartment type. The 3 types are the garden apartment, which uses a maximum land area coverage of 40% up to 3 stories maximum. It's permitted in R3 and RP3 districts. The walk-up apartment, which is the next higher density in terms of land area with a maximum of 70% building coverage, 3-story maximum, permitted in R4, RP4, and R5 and RP5 districts. And the mid-rise apartments, which is the highest density in terms of land area with a maximum of 70% building coverage, 5-story maximum, and that's permitted in R5 or an RP5. So we have layers of apartment styles and sizes and complexity, and the zoning is made to take into account those particular attributes. The current level of zoning request was for one that required lesser ground coverage with smaller apartment buildings and more open space between, and so therefore it did fit that particular apartment definition.
Thank you for that, Larry. The last question that I have, again, looking at phase 3 on the northern edge that abuts to the single-family homes, from a transition perspective, why were those 3 large 2 to 3 story apartments allowed there if it doesn't fit the transitional aspect of RP3?
The setback requirement for RP3 next to additional residence of any kind is only 25 feet. That's on its side of the border. They moved those back to be 50 feet, plus you have the 25 feet that already exist on the single-family side. So in effect, you have a distance between houses and apartments of 75 feet. That's proposed. Now, the buildings themselves have not been final platted yet. This is all a preliminary site development plan. So you're dealing basically with distances on a piece of paper. Once you actually go out and set the buildings into a final plan, and you have those pieces on a per site basis where each one goes, they generally wind up being a little bit further away than what the 50 feet is, because you've adjusted for road widths and other things that come into being. But without a final plat, I can't give you an exact location for those buildings, and that would not happen, of course, until further down the road from now.
Thank you. That's all I have for right now.
All right, thanks.
May I clarify one thing?
Certainly, certainly.
So on the stormwater study, I did want to clarify that that is the preliminary stormwater study, and there are final studies that come, including the SWIP and the KDHE permits and such.
Understood. So does KDHE have a specific environmental assessment requirement as well with their?
So they will on the stormwater permit itself.
Okay. Would that spring then fall under that?
I'm not sure if that would fall under that or not in the spring itself.
Okay, great, thanks. Todd Winters.
Sure, I have some questions. A couple things on the stormwater report. Actually, just one thing. I did notice, and maybe it's just a typo, but it says the 31 buildings with 160-something residents, or yeah. It's one of the first pages in there. On a stormwater report, is building more important than how many people live there, or
certainly
how many units?
Certainly the area of the building itself, and it looks at the drainage would look at the impervious areas and not necessarily the number of units in them.
Okay. The notice that was sent out, I guess this is probably a question for Ryan. The 20-day requirement, is that a requirement? Is that a best practice? Is that state law?
So the 20-day notice letter is a requirement in state statute. It's KSA 12-757. It is not required that it be sent anything other than regular first-class mail. Some Kansas statutes dictate that a higher level of service is required, such as certified mail, return receipt requested. The KSA 12-757 is silent on that, so first-class mail would be sufficient.
So if someone happened to keep their envelope with the post date on it, is that a valid concern?
Well,
if it was post dated,
right. So
10 days before?
Larry touched. the statute provides is that written notice of such proposed amendment shall be mailed at least 20 days before the hearing to all owners of record of real property within the area to be altered. So they should have been deposited in the U.S. mail 20 days before the date of the public hearing. The date of the public hearing is the date that the planning commission conducted the hearing.
Okay. Then I have another question for you also. On the petition, I realized that they did not get the 20% that was required. A good chunk of that is City of Gardner owned, I believe, and a good chunk of that is also owned by Craig Brett Homes, I believe. That's part of the process. Is there any conflict of interest in that at all?
So the statute the only exemptions within the statute of area to be included in the calculation includes like public rights of way. And so just because the city of Gardner owns a tract of land doesn't mean it's excluded. In theory, the city of Gardner could have been a protester to the application in question.
And let's see if I have any other questions. With the planning commission, can you refresh my memory? When they voted, were they voting only for the zoning change, or were they voting for the whole plan as well to approve?
Thank you for the clarification. They're voting for both, because in reality, whenever you're doing a planned zone, you have to have an attached plan. We had a previous planned zone, and this application, of course, was requesting to basically remove that one and put this one in its place. So therefore, you have both a rezoning request with an attached plan that would be approved at the same time by the planning commission. So those two actions are done together.
And then I guess one more on the stormwater. So if they did address the spring, could that be, when would that be before the final development plan, or when would that take place? When is that required, I guess? When is the final?
So you've got two levels of coverage here. What you're doing is, right now we're in the preliminary development phase in which the developer wishes to explain his use of the property. And during that, we have certain development standards that require a traffic study, a stormwater study, etc. There are additional things that occur during future steps in the process. One of those, which is what Michael referred to as the final development stormwater plan. And as we go through those steps, if there is a piece of the property that's found to be environmentally contaminated or environmentally sensitive, or some other aspect of it that needs further definition, that then is reported in that particular aspect. On the building side, if we have a property that's shown to have a building in a certain position, and then we identify a soils problem or a water problem or some issue that prevents a safe building from being constructed on that site, number one, they don't get a building permit. Number two, then that particular aspect, whatever it is, has to be addressed by the property owner so that it doesn't create a health hazard or a problem for the residents of the area. Whether that's a natural spring that continues to run so that it fills up their containment pond continuously, then they have to start taking that into account in addition to the normal rain runoff, because it's additional water running naturally through that area.
Okay.
So it's a little hard to answer your question, but that's where the layers come into play as we move through the process.
Okay. That's all the questions I have.
Okay, great. Council President Moore, do you happen to have any questions for staff or for the applicant?
Yeah, I have a few questions. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, first of all, I wanted to thank everybody for showing up to the meeting and voicing their concerns. I heard a lot of emotion. Being on my end of the call, I can't see faces, so I can only kind of surmise the feelings that are involved here. I know this is a very emotional thing for the residents. Unfortunately, I can't look at it from that perspective, though. I have to look at it from the perspective of, do I have a reason to send this back to the Planning Commission? So with that in mind, I wanted to ask some questions about, and particularly as it relates to the processes involved. And this one's for Larry. Were there any irregularities at all in anything regarding the notification process?
As far as we could tell, there should not have been any reason for any of the letters that we sent out not to have been delivered on time. We do not know why some people received their letters late. We had hoped that everyone that should have been notified should have received that notification. In addition, I do know that the signs were placed on the properties on either July 2nd or 3rd by the applicant. And I do know that we properly posted and have a copy of the posted newspaper release. So there should not have been any reason, at least preliminarily, that we can tell that notification should not have been received.
Were there any irregularities at all in the application?
In the application itself.
The application process or the application itself.
Yeah, anything related to the application process, including the public hearings and the proceedings at the Planning Commission.
No, sir, not that I can point to. The public responded. They brought forth their concerns and issues. Planning Commission listened. They made their decision and their recommendation, and it was brought forth.
Does this plan follow the comprehensive plan, or is there anything we could look at all that might cause concern as far as the comprehensive plan is concerned?
Like any development plan or application, the comprehensive plan is a diagram, plan in and of itself, and there are some parts of this application that do merge well with the comprehensive plan, and there are some parts of it that are actually in conflict with the comprehensive plan. But that's not an unusual case. We normally have aspects of every application that require tweaking and change or review so that we can try and bring it as close to the comprehensive plan as possible. But the comprehensive plan itself, remember, is a living document and does change all the time.
And this next question for Chief Belcher, if he's there. Will the public safety impact resulting from this development cause undue or unmanageable stress on the police department or fire department, to your knowledge?
Hey, Lee.
Yeah.
Speak this time without marbles in your mouth.
I'm asking specifically about crime or public safety, and whether this development will cause an unmanageable burden on the public safety department.
Well, the answer to that is if we could look into the crystal ball and predict the future, that would be, wonderful to be able to do that. As stated here tonight, with growth, there's going to be crime that's going to come along with it. It's just a matter of what type of crime we're talking about. Are we talking about violent crime? Or are we talking about petty crime? So I feel confident that, if this plan moves forward, that the police department will be able to police that area just like we do any other part of the town. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you. And last question I have is for Ryan, and that is, throughout this process, the application, and everything up to this point, have any statutes been violated to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge.
And that's all.
Okay. Thank you, Lee. I appreciate the questions. Council Vice President.
Real quick, Todd hit on it real quick, one of my thoughts, but I just wanted to ask, does anybody out in the audience have the stamped envelope that the city sent you? Because I know that was, somebody said we didn't do photocopies of it. I'd just like to know if anybody has that.
With the postmark?
With the postmark on it. Did you guys throw all yours away? That would have kind of answered a question for us, I think, if we'd because if we photocopied them before we sent them to the post office,
Yeah, but you
They
can't
still don't have
photocopy
the
a
postmark.
postmark you don't have.
Yeah, right, no, exactly what I'm saying, is if we photocopy them here, they go to the post office and then get a postmark when they run through the machine, so.
Well, when we mail here, we
Oh, you do the
we use the
Pitney
postage
Bowes?
meter,
Okay.
so, I mean,
Okay.
you could go check the postage meter.
Oh, we could do
mail
that.
out. and-
I mean, I'm not,
Check it.
I mean, we might as well just check it for our own, just see when they went out, because I'm guessing this is one of those times we can blame the federal government. Yeah, I like that. So anyway, so as long as we got that, I'm gonna say some things that are unpopular. I'm with Lee. We don't operate on feelings up here. We operate on what's legal and what's available to be done per code. The master plan is something that's just kind of, we have a guideline, we'd like to see stuff. But in the end, if a property owner, no different than you all, want to do something with your property and it's within the code book to do it, we can't tell you no. I mean, without having a very firm legal standing. So, I know that's not a very popular option, but.
Did you have any questions? Any
No,
further
that's
questions?
it.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, I had one additional question, if you don't mind.
Certainly.
And it's for Todd. Todd, you spoke from the podium here that there are some options for change that you and Phil had not discussed based on that roadblock. Could you step up to the podium if you're so inclined and explain what those options are? And I'm just playing off of what you stated, sir. So
Certainly, happy to.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
Oh, no, that's fine. We agreed to do 4 things. The first would be that we agreed on the Copper Springs side of the property line to erect a 6-foot privacy fence.
Okay.
I'm sorry. We agreed that on the Copper Springs side of the property line, we would erect a 6-foot privacy fence that would be located by Phil. We would pay to install the fence. It would be maintained by the homeowners whose land the fence is on. We also agreed to move some mature cedar trees into an area that would provide a secondary buffer, landscaping buffer. I will only say, I think having both of those in place, one or the other, is a waste of money. I think we either have the fence or we put in the landscape buffer, but to put in both does not make a great deal of sense. We much prefer the landscape buffer. It's not cheaper. It's probably more expensive in the long run, but we think it's much more attractive, and we think it serves the same purpose to delineate one property from another, one property type from another. These mature cedar trees would be installed by a company similar to Instant Shade. I don't know if you've seen the large tree spades. These are big trees. We would put those in at a time where we could grade out that northern tier adequately to provide for proper drainage. We also have to locate where the walking trail would be, and we also have to locate where there's a storm sewer. Todd, is that correct? I think that runs along that north line. We have to make sure that the trees would not be in conflict with either of those two things. So we would give the neighborhood the option to choose one of those two. The other thing we would agree to do is amend our plan and move some of our amenities around and replace the 24-unit building on the north with a 16-unit building, which we haven't shown that, but that would increase even more the open active rec space between the buildings. And that would put a total of 48 units along that north line. We keep hearing that that's 48 units looking into our back windows. That's really not true. Half the units would be facing south. So there'd be a total of 24 apartment units, a combination of 1- and 2-bedroom apartments which would actually face north, be oriented to the north. That's not a great deal more than if you were able to put in duplex units and pack those as tight as you would be allowed to pack those. It's not a great deal. There's not much difference really in the number of citizens you'd have up there and neighbors. The other plan or the other suggestion we had was we would eliminate the third story from 2 of the 3-story buildings that were closest to the north property line. And again, those options are on the table. We made those to Phil a couple of weeks ago, and we will stand by those. The only change being that we would like for the neighbors, if this would be approved, we would like for the neighbors to pick either that privacy fence or the landscaping buffer. We don't think both is necessary, and we think, in fact, it's a waste of money.
And Todd, one last question for you, and I really appreciate your support in this conversation. Are you guys handling, from a financial perspective, the lift station that would be added based on this potential apartment complex?
Yes, we would.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Okay. We've been, yes, Ryan, you
Mr.
look like
Mayor,
you're
just
way in.
before you all take action, because this is a rezoning decision, it's appropriate that disclosures of any ex parte contacts be made by all of you. So to the extent any of you have had ex parte contacts, meaning contacts outside of this meeting with either proponents or opponents of the zoning application in question, it'd be appropriate for you to disclose that before you take action. And it can be as simple as, yes, I've had contact with proponents and opponents.
Absolutely. Okay, so we'll start on my left here with, I'm sorry?
Lee still has another question.
Oh, who has another question?
Lee.
Oh, Lee, do you have another question, Lee?
Yes, I do.
All right, thank you.
This one's for Larry. I just wanted to make sure, will there be additional opportunities for current residents to participate in additional planning activities on this specific project in the future?
There are no additional public hearings that are required through any of the additional steps. There are final development plans that are brought forth and approved by the Planning Commission, so anyone can appear before the Planning Commission when that final plat's brought forth and make requests and make a statement as to what they feel could be done to improve them or to change them. But there is no public hearing requirement, so there would be no official notification. But we do have, all of our Planning Commission meetings are posted in advance, 20 days in advance on our public website. So anyone that wanted to see what was coming up could see that. I suppose we could take the extra step, and if there was someone that would say to us, please notify me when this comes back before the Planning Commission, we would be happy to do that.
Thank you.
All right, so back to the issue of ex parte. I'm going to start on my far left with Councilmember Warsick.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. I have definitely met with the residents of Copper Springs numerous times, I might add, and I have had the pleasure to meet with Todd and Tony over a cup of coffee. So yes, I've had communications with both sides of this potential development.
I have had conversations with both parties as well.
Yep, as have I.
Both for me.
Both for me.
And Lee?
Yes, I've had contact with both parties.
Okay. All right. So with that being said, there's 3 approaches, I believe, that we have here at our disposal. Is that correct, City Attorney Dank?
Correct.
We can move to approve, we can move to vote down, and the third option is to refer back to the Planning Commission. With the approval option, there is an option to suggest adjustments. Am I not correct in that? That we can make some adjustments without them going to a supermajority, correct?
Well, if you're going to take some action different than what the Planning Commission takes, then that would be required to be taken by a supermajority or
Okay,
two-thirds.
so any material changes at all to the proposal before us would require a supermajority. Okay,
But not to send back.
but not to send back, you can send back with a majority vote.
Right.
And with a zoning, I do get a vote. Am I correct in that?
That is
So it'd be
correct.
6 votes, which would be 4 votes to pass on any non-supermajority vote that, with adjustments, okay?
Correct.
So I will entertain a motion on new business item number 1.
I'd make the motion, Mayor, that we do indeed send this back to Planning Commission, incumbent upon the change to the northern piece of this plat in Phase 3, addressing the buffer and/or the transition from single-family to apartments.
Is there a second?
There's a second, yeah.
Okay. We do have a motion and a second.
Point of order, are we also gonna get to, besides questions?
Yes, well, I'm open up for discussion after the second, so, okay. Motion and second is on the floor to refer this back to Planning Commission for further study. Mr. Powell,
Is this make sure I understand the content of your motion, sir, is to review it in regards to the buffer zone, but not maybe in regards to the 4 items he has offered?
Correct.
So just to consider whether or not the buffer zone is adequate at 50 feet?
No, sir. Let me be specific, and thank you for the clarification. What I would like to, or the reason why I would like to send this back to Planning Commission is the apartments, the 3 units that are on the northern plat and south of Copper Springs in Phase 3 should be duplexes, condos, et cetera, based on that transitional piece, not the buffer piece.
Okay, so, thank you. That's
Yes,
what I
sir.
wanted to know, is that you really would like to see that those 3 apartment units be a transitional zone of some other type of residential property of a lesser nature.
Right, which would align with our master plan, which would align with some of the precedents that we have in other neighborhoods where they go from single family to duplexes to apartments.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Maybe with that further explanation, is Councilman Winters still second the
Yes,
motion
yes.
for further explanation? Okay.
all right, any more discussion on the motion vote on the floor? All right, since this is a motion on a zoning, we still have to do a roll call, do we not? To refer this back? So I will ask the city clerk to call the roll on this, since it is a special circumstance.
Councilman Gardner?
Yes?
Councilman Melton?
No.
Councilman Moore?
No.
Councilman Winters?
Yes.
Councilman Baldwin?
No.
Councilman Shute? Mayor Shute?
Yes,
So it
we are
failed.
deadlocked at 3.
That motion
So
failed.
that motion would fail for lack of a majority. All right, make a motion on, a second,
We have
motion to
further discussion, sir?
You want some comments?
Well, it's not in order, but I will take them.
I'm asking if you will accept them.
Yes, I will accept the comments.
So I would like to clarify that the reason I voted no is because I feel like that's a waste of time. The Planning Commission has already approved it, and I spent a lot of time looking to see if this was really R5. Talked to staff and everything else, and everything, all the comments I had coming in tonight, and every note I made from everyone speaking, this all comes down to density. Every single thing: traffic, crime, kid safety, everything is density. And at the end of the day, those apartment buildings meet the garden apartment style. They meet RP3. They're going to pass again. Only if Mr. Blakely would like to change his plan is that necessary. And he's already offered his suggestions of what he's willing to do. So to send it back there so that it can come right back to us so that we can do this seems to be a waste of time in my opinion.
And I hear what you're saying, Councilman Baldwin, but as I said, and the rest of us agree that we've all talked to both parties, and I talked to the community. And perhaps home field advantage is not the right word, but I listen to the community. That community has invested in our community. That community votes. That community has children that go to our school. They shop at Price Choppers and other places. They buy their fuel to go to work because a high percentage of us commute. And so I really listen to them. And in listening to them, and to your point, in studying this and visiting with staff and the city administrator, the thing that I gleaned from my conversations, albeit what you included, was that buffer, or the type of residents that were being put, type of buildings that were being put in their backyard, that resonated with me, and that's the reason why I made that motion.
No, I can understand that.
And I'd like to clarify too, the density was important to me as well, and the buffer going to the duplexes did reduce that density to some degree. I mean, I drove around to 3 different apartment complexes today to kind of find out, you know, their capacity and where they're at, and just driving into them, I mean, they're massive. I mean, they're big. There's lots of apartments, and I was shocked when I found out they're only half what we're putting in. I mean, this is a lot of apartments, and so part of my agreement with you there was that, you know, the buffer is going to reduce some of that down to some degree, but I just feel that we're putting in this huge density right next to some of the largest homes, most expensive homes in Gardner, not close to any amenities. I don't think it's the right place. It doesn't follow our comp plan. It doesn't follow our master plan.
And I drove around as well, Dr. Todd, and in particular, the apartments that are out on Gardner Road on the west side, there's no single-family residential. So moving forward, we should see the opposite of this. We should see apartments, duplexes, condos, maybe fourplexes, and then single-family homes moving most likely in a northern direction. And to your point, that's the reason why I made the motion, because that would also address the density piece as well as address the homeowners' issue with having that in their backyards. Sure. And that's the reason why I asked Todd and the other Todd about those 4 items that he spoke of: the fence, the trees, moving of the buildings, and making them all 2-story. So I'm trying to kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Second.
There's a motion from Melton, second Baldwin, that we approve, I think there's let's see here. I gotta read this, that's the reason why I'm saying, okay. Because there's a specific ordinance number and I have to go through this. A motion, Melton, second Baldwin, that we adopt ordinance, and I believe it's 2521, is that correct? 2621, I'm sorry, thank you, 2621. My eyesight is failing me here. An ordinance changing the zoning classifications or districts of certain lands located in the city of Gardner, Kansas under the authority granted by Title 17 of the Municipal Code of the city of Gardner, Kansas. And this is just a straight roll call vote. City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilman Melton?
Yes.
Councilman Moore?
Yes.
Councilman Winters?
No.
Councilman Baldwin?
Yes.
Councilman Reversick?
No.
Mayor Shute?
Yes. The ordinance 2621 passes. Thank you for the discussion, and thank you for your attention. New business item number 2. Consider authorizing the execution of a DBIA design-build contract with a joint venture group with Burns and McDonald CAS Constructors, LLC, for the final design, construction, and startup of the Hillsdale Water Treatment Plant expansion project. Please, may we have some order? Gons Garcia, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor,
City Council. This new business item, staff is trying to seek approval for the final design, construction, and startup of the Hillsdale Water Treatment Plant Expansion Project. As you may recall, on April 1st, the City Council approved a contract for the preliminary design with the joint venture group, Burns & McDonnell and CAS constructors. The original plan was for a 2 million gallon day facility at a cost of $21.5 million. During the preliminary design, the scope changed, and now we're looking at a 3 million gallon day facility at a cost of $24.8 million. The joint venture group, Burns & McDonnell and CIS constructors are here to do a presentation. It'll take about 20 minutes, and they'll explain some of the major differences and why the difference in estimates.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, and thank you, Gons. My name is John Mitchell, and I'm with the Burns & McDonnell CAS joint venture. With me here this evening is Mike Hafling. Mike is the president of CAS Construction and will serve as construction manager for the project moving forward. Dana Weir is with us tonight as well. Dana is the design manager for the project, and Josh Schindrell. Josh will be our site manager moving forward. I'd like to start with just a little bit of recap of where we began back in December of 18. And as Gon said, the original conceptual plan was to add 2 MGD capacity to the existing plant and then continue to add capacity in 2 million gallon a day phases. And there'd be 6 2 million gallon a day phases for a total build out capacity of 12 million gallons a day. Our estimate at that time was $21.4 million. That initial study, the core treatment technology in that study was a technology called clarification and flocculation. It used plate settlers and paddle flocculators, and those types of equipment are shown in the photograph here. The plate settlers enhance the settling a bit. However, the staff had some concerns that the plate settlers may be a little more difficult to operate and maintain over time. As we went through the process, the team identified a couple of important enhancements to the project. As we went through, the core technology changed from the plate settler technology to a little bit more conventional solids contact clarifier, and the capacity was increased to 3 million gallons a day from 2 million gallons a day. So why are those 2 enhancements a good value for the city of Gardner? For changing the technology to solids contact clarifiers, we felt and staff felt it was important that the operators who would operate and maintain that plant over time were familiar and were comfortable with the operation. We went to treatment plants both at Fort Smith and at Lawrence to show the operators both technologies. They got a chance to talk to other operators and make that evaluation for themselves. The difference in cost in those technologies really didn't move the needle much in the project. So we felt it was important that the operations staff was comfortable and confident moving forward with that decision. So that's the decision that was made on the treatment technology. And that's really the heart of the treatment process. Moving the expansion from a 2 MGD expansion to a 3 MGD expansion means that we'll be able to ultimately achieve 12 million gallons a day in 4 phases instead of 6. that economy of scale and ability to consolidate construction activities, mobilizations, bonds, and insurance significantly reduces the overall capital cost of the program moving forward. It also reduces the O&M cost and life cycle cost of the plant, because now you're now, when you get to the 12 MGD build out, would now be operating just 4 trains of 3 MGD instead of 6 trains of 2 MGD apiece. So that economy of scale reduces the overall life cycle cost and the cost of operation and maintenance over time. And finally, that moving from 2 million gallons a day to 3 million gallons a day, we were able to increase capacity almost 50% for about a 17% differential in capital cost. So in our evaluation and along with staff, we felt that was a good value for the city. The plant as it's currently designed, and it's not important to remember everything on this list, but what's important to notice here is many of the facilities will be set up to go all the way to 12 MGD. The parallel 24-inch raw water transmission that goes from the intake up to the plant will now have a capacity of 12 MGD. The splitter structure that distributes flow in the plant will be sized for ultimate build out. And the filtered water transfer pump station will be sized for ultimate build out as well. That's a deep structure that's in rock, and the economies of scale kind of dictated that we build it for the 12 MGD now instead of building that in phases. The rest of the treatment plant will have capacity to deliver 6 million gallons a day. And it's important to note too that the solids contact clarifiers and the filters are sized at 3 million gallons a day, but they'll have hydraulic capacity to take about 4 million gallons a day on an intermittent basis. And why that's important is because when you're ultimately built to 12 million gallons a day, the operators will be able to remove any one of those units from service for maintenance and service and still be able to maintain that 12 million gallon a day delivery. I'll ask Dana Weir to step up and kind of walk us through each of the individual parts and pieces of the plan.
All right, so the square box over on the right there is the carbon contact facility and the carbon storage. So one of the things that we did with the plant operators was go and look at a couple of different pack storage options, which is powdered activated carbon. The city currently uses super sacks, and so the chemical is delivered in basically 1-ton sacks of dry material. That raises a lot of safety issues. Pack is explosive in nature, so you have to design all your facilities for that. In this model, this is actually what Lawrence does. The pack is delivered dry and immediately mixed with water, so it's stored as a slurry, and then that gets rid of any of the explosive nature of the chemical and means that the equipment costs and things go down. So a portion of that facility is just the storage with top mixers that will keep the slurry in suspension, and then the 4 open chambers is the carbon contact basin that the water moves through. So this is actually replacing the city's existing carbon facility, and all of the raw water will come through this and then split between the 2 facilities. So just downstream of our carbon facility, we'll split and we'll have 3 MGD that will go to the existing, or not the existing, but the new solids contact clarifier. So that's our circular basin that shows the water in it. The other 3 would be the expansions, and the remainder of the water will go to the existing treatment plant. So we've designed this hydraulically so that everything will work together. Downstream of our solids contact clarifiers, we go to the filter building. So that's the just off on the left-hand side of the page there. And so that is designed that there will be 4 filters, and with each expansion, build out another 4 filters. So you get a little bit more economy of scale with each expansion, that there will not be 4 build outs of the filter building, it will just be 3, because you size filters with 1 out of service. So every time you add on, you don't have to take another 1 out of service, it's just the total number. Then we've got a transfer pump station, so that's the low concrete structure there that will house transfer pumps as well as backwash pumps for the filters. That's a bit of an enhancement for the treatment plant. Right now, the existing filters backwash off of the filter effluent without any pumping, and they don't really get enough flow to properly backwash the filters. So this will be designed to get full fluidization of the filters and get a little bit better runtime and treatment through the filters. Adjacent to that, we have a new chlorine storage building and main electrical power and distribution for the plant. As this facility has been added onto, the electrical is a little unique in terms of...
You can tell like it is here. We're not like those other cities.
No, I mean, so anytime you add on, it just gets to be a challenge when you're going from, one electrical building or one electrical room that serves the original plant and then the expansion and the different facilities inside of it. So we'll be bringing in a new service here and then distributing out to the existing plant. Then we've got a new 1 million gallon clear wall that we'll be installing so that they get some additional storage at the treatment plant, which will allow them some flexibility in terms of operating and maintaining the existing storage that they have, as well as some flexibility in terms of distribution and getting water to town. And then we're also building new residuals lagoons that are at the bottom of the hill. So everything that you see here at the top of the picture is going on top of the existing lagoons or existing lagoon. And so we're building new lagoons at the bottom of the hill so that everything can flow by gravity from the new facilities rather than having to be pumped up to the top of the hill. All right, and then I think we've got a video here. So, like I said, kind of fly in. The lagoons are off to the left right now, so that's one of the existing, which will remain in service throughout the duration of the project. And then, as I mentioned, building a new divided cell that will serve out the 6 million gallon a day facility. And our storage there, the circular tanks. And so we're filling in one of the existing lagoons and building on top of that. So this is all done within the existing footprint of the site, or at least the existing plant boundaries. We are extending the fence closer to the existing property boundaries, but extending out from where the existing fence lines are. So, any questions?
I did just from a safety.
Hold on one second. The mayor's gone. We have point of order. Public comments we need to go through. If
Oh,
there's
yes,
anybody
thank
to
you.
do public
I agree.
comments. So if you wouldn't mind just stepping to the side.
Sure.
If you have any comments on anything for public comments, please come forward now.
Okay. I think John's got a few more items.
Oh,
here,
do you
but-
still have some more? Well, no, go ahead and finish them, sir. We'll hold off on public comments, so.
Thank you. Good point. The team looked at schedule here in 2 different ways. When we initially talked back in February, we talked about how to get water delivered within a year. And so we laid out a schedule here that delivers water within about 13 months. A couple of things to note here on this, what I'll call the accelerated schedule, is that by October 15th, we would need to have the lagoons cleaned out because we're going to reclaim part of that land to build the new plant in. The lagoon cleaning contractors are telling us now that the earliest available date that they can have that done is October 15th. So that really kind of fixes the front end of the schedule. We'll mobilize and do some site work and site preparation earthwork, but building the facilities won't start until the lagoons are cleaned out. The other significant constraint in the schedule is, as Gons mentioned, are easements. Back when the original plant was built, we don't know if the easements for part of the raw water pipeline weren't obtained or they just weren't filed, but we can't find them anywhere. So we'll have to go through an easement acquisition for part of the raw water pipeline that's on federal ground over by the lake. And then we've got about 15 parcels with 13 landowners that we'll have to negotiate easements with. And July 24th is really kind of the drop dead date to have that. I'm sorry, January 24th is really the drop dead date to have that done by, so that we can begin construction on the pipeline. So when we constrain the schedule by those two things and then looked at how to get it done in a year, what we learned is that with this accelerated schedule, we could deliver an extra 1 MGD of water by October. Now, in our viewpoint, that really doesn't help, because the peak demand seasons really occur between May and August. The other part of the accelerated schedule is to accelerate to have an extra MGD in October carries about $186,000 in premium overtime labor. So then we backed up and looked at the schedule in a little bit different way. The alternative schedule, we have the same overall contract time, but reach substantial completion in April, still before the next peak demand season. But that reduces the premium overtime labor by $186,000. And we recommended this alternative schedule because the premium overtime labor really doesn't buy anything in terms of getting water faster or getting water in time for your peak water demands. So this is the schedule that we're proposing this evening. We'll work the same number of hours. We'll have final completion on the same date. We'll just spread the tail end of the project out a little bit and avoid the premium overtime.
Okay.
The project cost, we're at $24,795,542. And some vital statistics on the project, which you might find kind of interesting. There's nearly 66,000 yards of cut and fill on the project, and if you thought about that in terms of how many truckloads, that's nearly 3,000 dump truckloads of material either in or out to the site. Another way to think of it, it's a 1 acre parcel that would be about 28 feet deep. So there's a lot of earthwork in the project, and a lot of earthwork that we'll be able to start even before the lagoons are cleaned out. We'll begin the clearing and grubbing. There's nearly 750,000 pounds of reinforcing steel on the project and 3,000 yards of concrete on the project. So this is a significant project and one that'll be challenging but doable to get done in that schedule. Now, Gons also asked me to talk about what the next steps would be. So what we'll ask for your approval on tonight is the treatment plant, the $24.7 million treatment plant. But it's important to recognize that as you continue to grow and your water demands continue to increase, there are additional things that will need to be done over the next 5 years, over the next 10 years, over the next 20 years. And I want to kind of lay out a roadmap here for what those things would be. The next step, and I think the most critical step, is the finished water transmission, and that is getting water from the plant into the distribution system in town. The existing system is limited to 6 million gallons a day. When we're done with the plant expansion, we'll have some redundancy in the raw water pipeline. We'll have redundancy in the plant. We'll have redundancy in storage. But the single point of failure in the system then becomes the raw water pipeline. So it's important to start planning for and moving forward on that project. Our projection here is that the pipeline should be in place no later than 2025. because you can see from the demand curve at 6 MGD, that takes us out to about 2027, 2026 or 2027. So we want to be in a position where you can push more than 6 million gallons to town before that timeline. Our recommendation is that as soon as you can, you should begin the alignment study and start acquiring the easements. That could take a couple of years to get through that process. The planning budget for that is between $5 and $7 million. The raw water intake at Hillsdale is a priority. The existing intake, again, is sized for 6 million gallons a day. That's as much water as can flow through the existing structure. The pipeline will be sized up to take 12, but the structure on the lake itself can only take about 6. There's several different options for the configuration of that intake, but the important thing here, I think, is to get through conceptual design, begin the environmental permitting and the environmental impact statement. The Corps will require that because it's on federal ground, and the cofferdams that will go into the lake to isolate the intake will have to go through that environmental permitting. And then finally, the high service pump station, again, that will be a bottleneck by 2025. We need to begin planning for the high service pump station upgrade, and the budget for that is in the range of $2 to $3 million. So that's what I have for you, and
That's a lot of millions.
that's a lot of millions. It is. It is. The good thing is after that, after those things are done, if we kind of go back to the demand curve, that will allow you to use all of the capacity of the existing plant up to 4 million gallons a day, all the capacity of the expansion up to 3 million gallons a day. So that's about 7 MGD. And that takes you out to about 2035 before additional investments would be needed if growth tracks on this same projection. So our team is ready to stand for any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation, and ask for public comment on new business item number 2. Council, any members of council for any questions for the engineers or for Gons on this?
Looks exciting.
Proposal?
Just out of curiosity, so the additional expansions, I would assume there'd be substantially less time and less money comparatively to the initial. I mean, when we're just adding on it in 2030, 2035.
Yeah, the 20 or 2035 expansion would look like another cell in what Dana showed as the powdered activated carbon. It would look like another solids contact clarifier, another train in the filter building. Those would be in the range of $7 to $9 million.
A lot less than 24.
Right.
I would like to make a recommendation to staff, if we can, the more right-of-way we can acquire now for future expansion would be better, I think, because if we have to come back later and put in another line or something, it'd be easier to have it already, the paperwork done, so to speak. So,
Well, we're substantially getting right of way anyway for the existing transmission line. Am I not mistaken on that?
For the raw water pipeline, we're
Correct.
actively getting right away on the raw water pipeline.
that's what I'm saying. I just think, the more we can get now, it's cheaper than in 2035.
Right.
And easier, because nobody's built on top of it potentially because we've got the right of way.
It's that 5.6 miles between the treatment plant and the city network that I think we really need to.
That's where I'm talking about.
Right.
Yep. So maybe we can try to acquire both sets of easements now. That makes some sense.
That would be the recommendation, to get started on the raw.
Yeah.
Yep.
We're started on the raw water. Let's
think
get
you were
started
wrong
on
for
the
that
finished
portion
water
right
as soon as
after
possible.
I just think it would just as wide as we can get, as much as,
Absolutely.
All right.
Mayor, I had one question for Gons.
Sure.
On on, or with Water District 7. In our packet here, they've retained consulting firm to conduct an analysis of Gardner's expansion and its financial impact. The findings will be presented to Water 7 Board to review and consider its options. Do we have a timeline on that, just out of curiosity? When they're going to present to their board?
Right now, they are evaluating, right now they have two options for purchasing water. One is Miami 2. They're gonna be expanding their facility within the next couple of years, and they're looking at us. With the previous conversation with Water 7, I told them we need a decision before July. I know they're still working on it because they have retained Lamp and Reinerson to do the comparison. So they should have an answer within the next 30 days.
So it's forthcoming then?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you, sir.
Yep. Any other questions? Lee, you have any questions for Gons or the Burns and Mac staff?
Nope, I'm good, thanks.
Okay. All right, seeing no other questions, I will entertain a motion on new business item number 2.
So moved.
Second. Motion, Melton, second, Gregorsek, that we authorize the city administrator to execute a DBIA design build contract with the joint venture group of Burns and McDonnell and CAS Constructors LLC for the final design, construction, and startup of the Hillsdale Water Treatment Plant Expansion Project in the amount not to exceed $24,795,542. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? New business item number 2 passes. New business item number 3, and I believe this is related. Consider authorizing the executive amendment 1 to the Hillsdale Water Treatment Plant Expansion Phase 1 agreement with Burns and McDonnell CAS Constructors for easement acquisition support. Gons Garcia, I think we just talked about this.
Yes, sir. Yeah, briefly, during the phase 1, the preliminary design, while reviewing the existing raw water transmission main and designing the improvement during the phase 1, it was determined that we needed additional easements for the raw water line, and it was identified that we didn't have any records on a permanent easement for the raw water line that was put in back in 1998. So we'd like to request an amendment to the phase 1 agreement for the joint venture Burns and McDonnell CAS Constructors to do the easement acquisition for $28,076.
Thank you, Gons. Any public comment on new business item number 3? Seeing none. Any questions from the council?
Is that a not to exceed NTE then?
Yeah, they're all NTEs unless specified otherwise. Anybody else? Lee, you have anything?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right, I'll entertain a motion on new business item number 3.
So move.
Second.
Motion Gregorsek, second Melton, that we authorize the city administrator to execute amendment 1 to the Hillsdale Water Treatment Plant Expansion Phase 1 agreement with Burns and McDonnell CAS Constructors for easement acquisition support in the amount not to exceed $28,076. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? New business item number 3 passes. That's all for new business. Thank you very much, Gons. We'll move on to council updates. Does staff have anything for the council this evening? City Attorney Dank. Nothing. Finance Director Matt Wolf.
Nothing.
Okay. City Clerk Sharon.
Nothing for me.
All right. Chief Belcher. Nothing. Wow, let's be quick. Gons Garcia.
No, sir.
Okay. Jason Bruce, Parks and Rec.
No, sir.
Man, Larry Powell.
No, sir.
Okay, and Michael.
I think somebody has to say something.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael.
So yeah, there you go. All I had this evening, the airport board meeting was moved from last week to this Tuesday, the 21st, and I'm sorry, Wednesday, the 21st. So it's this Wednesday evening, the 21st, and that will actually be here in the council chambers at 6 p.m. And I believe the Friday memo had said the senior center, but this game will be.
Great. Thank you, Michael. City Administrator, anything on your plate tonight? No, I don't have anything. Okay. All right, I'll start on, for council updates for staff. I will start with Councilman Graworczyk.
I just had one item, or one question, one comment. The question is for Michael Kramer. What's the status of the crosswalk that Rich and I brought up?
183rd?
Yeah, on 183rd. Thank you.
That crosswalk bids, I believe, this Friday, the 23rd.
And then the last thing that I wanted to say, despite the outcome of agenda number 1, I did want to say thank you to all the staff and council as well for the civility and I think just the professional perspective that we all took in our own right. So I wanted to say thank you to that.
All right, thank you, Michael. Randy, sorry. I was thinking Michael over here, and then Randy.
Turn that sign around for you.
All right.
Name tags for everybody.
Sorry. Okay. Council Vice President Melton.
You got that one right.
Not
so
Scott.
that's good.
Rich.
So first thing I want to say, I reached out to the school district and talked to Pam about teaming up with the city and doing, like Heath had mentioned, doing a parade. And from the school district's perspective, they just can't put it together. They said it's too much work for them. They're going to focus more on just keeping what's going on with the fair instead of trying to do a separate one completely. They just said they didn't really have the manpower and being able to put the whole thing together. So that's kind of a bummer, but that's what happens when the school gets big. You know, we can't do stuff like that
Is there
anymore.
any possibility that maybe a booster club or a volunteer organization from, of parents or folks that have an interest in the school district?
I don't know that they have it. I mean, because it's hard. It's like pulling teeth to get Project Grad volunteers.
Oh, I know.
I've been involved with that. They didn't really. Because here's the thing: if it doesn't happen, then it falls back on the school district, no matter what. So.
Okay.
So I did want to say thank you for repairing the fountain. Man, the world started turning again. So I was glad to see pictures on Facebook. So thank you for getting that done. And I did want to give a big shout out to the mayor and Danica, because the mayor and I were having lunch one day, and I had this idea about the Gardner Day at the K, and I said, where's she at? Hey, there
She's
you are.
in the back.
All right. So, it was like, I said, boy, wouldn't it be cool if we could see these two guys playing each other? And Steve whipped out his phone and looked up the dates when they were going to play. And I said, let's get a thing going. And here we are. So I'm super excited about that. And I don't even like baseball. So, but I think I'm going to go. So.
And thanks also to Jason Camus from the Gardner Chamber of Commerce, because they're doing a lot of the heavy lifting on this one as well.
Good.
So it's a team effort.
So, and then on the fog seal, Michael, I have a special request. You're gonna love this. So if you wouldn't mind, and this is gonna sound bizarre, but I have reason. If we could get an idea of if after a chip and seal is done, what would it cost to come back and fog seal, a street per foot? So we have a standard 8 or 10 foot wide street. How much is it per foot?
More than 10 feet wide.
Or however wide they are, an average city street. So that way, if I just get out a walking stick and I walk down there and my street's 350 feet long, and I can go, okay, times whatever the amount is, and that's what it would cost to fog seal. So I can give people perspective on why we're not fog sealing everything, and maybe we do have the money to fog seal everything, but I need to know that cost so I can justify the expense one way or the other.
I can follow up and get that to you.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
So you're looking for linear lane foot?
Yeah.
Okay, linear lane foot.
Something that we can, put out there for some people like myself to understand. So it's got to be crayons and stuff. So, and then finally on Indio, I've been, I know we had a request for that tonight for a non-discrimination ordinance. I did a video 3 months ago asking for anybody who's had any kind of issues to come forward to talk to me, because the thing is, when we write an Indio, I think the goal is to resolve an issue that's happening, and without any knowledge of what is happening, if anything, don't think writing an NDO based on what we don't know is really gonna work. So that's kind of where I'm at. I still have yet to hear from anybody. I know there was a Facebook poll that I had more people actually contact me about the Facebook poll saying, I don't want to put my name in there because if I click something, I'm going to get harassed by people who may know me. And I thought, it's up to you, but it's ironic though. I had more people worried about that than I ever got feedback on the other. So, that's all I have for tonight.
Okay, great, thanks, Rich.
I was just worried about
You know what? Council President Moore. Are you
Yeah.
on? Yes.
Got two things real quick. First, on Rich's question about how much does it cost per linear foot for the fog seal, I would likewise be interested to know what it costs in terms of opportunity to cover additional lane miles with chip and seal. So if we do fog seal, how much chip and seal do we have to forego in order to do that?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
what do we lose in the streets?
If you want to keep it cost neutral.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to, I guess what I'm trying to say is, I understand that there's an opportunity cost associated with doing the fog seal, and I also understand that we are behind the curve on covering all of our streets. So I want to make sure that folks are aware that fog seal, while it's awesome and it adds a couple of years of longevity to the chip sealed surface, there is a cost involved in terms of other street surface that will not get treated.
Okay.
Funding.
All right. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on real quick?
Yeah, second thing was I wanted to float the idea of perhaps directing staff to study bike lanes on the major thoroughfares, arteries through town. Obviously not US 56, but streets like Center, Moonlight, Madison, and other major arteries through town. I'd like to see if there's, state funding, federal funding, county funding, whatever we can come up with for grants, to see about putting some bike lanes in town.
This sounds kind of selfishly. Is this because you're trying to run that race where you need donations? just out of curiosity.
There is probably a selfish aspect to it, but it is something that has been on my mind for a number of years since I've
started writing
lived in
about
Gardner.
Well,
we are a growing community, and we're not very inviting to bicyclists.
I would tend to agree, but I'm wondering what the cost per linear foot of that would be. I'm just kidding.
That's like something I would say.
I was wondering if you were going to go that way, but seriously, I mean, there would be an additional cost. It's just a matter of, whether that would be something that we could offset with grants. There are quite a few grants out there that allow you, that are for bike lanes or other kinds of pedestrian access to roadways. So we could potentially look at those. We have a tremendous grant writer that knows her stuff. So
Yeah, and that would align with some of the Parks and Recs initiatives. If I may interrupt and piggyback on what Lee and Rich were inquiring about on lane mile cost of fogging, my question to the two gentlemen would be, are we diverting monies from dollars needing to be spent on curbing? We had a neighbor, Rich and I live on the same street, out last night at 10 o'clock shoveling three
Gravel.
5-gallon buckets of gravel
Yep.
from the front of her drive. And again, that's just in front of my house, but I'm sure that's indicative of what's going on across our fair city. So that was my question. Are we gonna divert those dollars from curbing to potential fog and seal? Understanding the benefits, don't get me wrong. Mark?
Oh, no, yes, go on.
Well, since you've all brought up something involving the roadways, and we don't have a way to pay for any of it going forward, I suggest we work up a work session or a presentation on how we're gonna do all of that, and we can see all those numbers.
Hey, that sounds like a great idea.
Those dollars expire in 7 years.
Mark, and to be honest, I think we need to probably incorporate, because of the bike lanes issue, we need to incorporate the Public Works and Accessibility Advisory Committee in a joint session to discuss this.
Sure thing.
I know that's a lot of people, but it's worth it because we do need to come up with short, medium, and long-term solutions for all of this. That sales tax is not forever. It's going to sunset. And we need to come up with a plan from the short to the medium to the long term on how we're gonna manage ongoing maintenance as well as the additional needs for things like bike lanes and accessible transportation. So yes, I am completely in agreement with you there, Mark, and would like to direct staff to look at the possibility of scheduling a work session.
Yay.
There you go, that's cooperation. And anything else from your end, Lee?
Nope, but
Okay, great, thanks. Todd Winters,
Just
Mr. Gardner Grind.
Yeah, just a thank you to Jason and staff. It was a great event, and even with the rain, they just pushed it back a little bit, unfortunately.
Just a little muddy.
I didn't get the email till I was already there, but that's okay. It was still fun. It seemed well attended. Everyone seemed to have fun. The obstacles were fun. The mud was great. So, yeah, my kids had fun.
Great. Anything else? No. Okay, great. Mark Baldwin.
Going back to new business item number 1, I would like to see the staff look at or create some sort of a packet. I'm just thinking PDF, ebook type thing here, short pages that spells out very quickly duties of a planning commission, duties of the city council on these type of issues. What can I do once I receive this notification or I see this sign in my yard? What does this mean, right? And walk people through it, because there's so many times that we answer or somebody asks the same question, and I think they just don't have a place to get the information. So I'd like to see something out there on the website, please.
Like an FAQ?
Yeah, basically.
We have something similar to that we use internally just to mark the passage of each project. It will take a lot to make it a public document.
Actually, I think that would help to get rid of a lot of the confusion surrounding these projects for people out there.
I think that document and that extra meeting early on will help facilitate.
I love the fact you're including that additional neighborhood meeting. That's gonna help to get folks that are around there that feel like they have a little bit of an impact on themselves on these projects, a voice at the beginning of the process rather than toward the end when they don't think that they're gonna do any good. So.
Hey, Mayor, can I throw one thing in?
Absolutely, Lee.
Along those same lines, I did make use of the website regarding the planning process in my dealing with the one of the parties in business item 1, and it kind of gave me the idea that maybe an infographic about the planning process might be something that we could find value in putting on the website.
Yeah, I think we do the same thing with the budgeting process. We have that nice little wheel that we can use, and yeah,
There's that timeline one on there, but yeah, it's on a wheel.
Yeah, because it is a cycle, a process that is repeatable. So yeah, I think we could probably do something like that.
We can use a new wheel too. We don't have to use the same one. Right?
Of course.
Okay. Mix it up a little.
Yeah, you're going to reinvent the wheel. Huh?
I'm not. I'm gonna let staff do it.
Okay. All right, moving on. Actually, I guess I'm the only one that has anything.
We're done.
So I've had quite a few. I have a gavel. I don't have to use it on the podium. Anyway, NDO. There's a lot of discussion about the non-discrimination ordinance around Johnson County. Ryan Dank, give us a little bit of an idea I know that you've worked on a couple of other NDOs in Johnson County for other municipalities. And I just wanted to have your thoughts on what the potential pitfalls are, what the advantages are of doing such an ordinance. I'll cede the floor to you.
Well, I'll try to cover it. So some of my concerns in looking at what different municipalities have done is, well, maybe I'll back up a little bit. I mean, the reason why municipalities are looking at taking action on these non-discrimination ordinances where they perceive a gap to be between state and federal law and then other classes of employees such as the LGBT community. There's a perception out there that there is that gap of protection. And so I think that is why, and this isn't the first run at this type of process. You know, there have been movements by different communities for non-discrimination resolutions, things like that in the past, going back, I don't know, probably at least 10 years. The current movement, however, is to really create an enforcement mechanism, or at least the model that I'm familiar with, is to take it one step further beyond a resolution expressing support for non-discrimination and expressing support that state and federal governments take some sort of legislative action to legislate in that arena. But now what local governments are looking to do is to create an enforcement mechanism for enforcement of individuals' rights in that, for those gap individuals. You know, local governments don't have the full legislative powers of the state and federal governments. They don't have legal authority to create causes of action for damages. And so really their enforcement authority for the most part is limited to their expression of their police powers. And so that includes the ability to enforce codes, the ability to take enforcement action through the municipal courts, things like that. You know, that's what I've seen in the NDOs that have taken on the enforcement aspect. Some concerns that I have had is that you know, at the state and federal levels, they're different, actually dedicated administrative bodies that are committed to the enforcement aspect of it. The Kansas Human Rights Commission is in charge with enforcement of the Kansas Human Rights Act. The EEOC and Department of Justice are charged with enforcement of federal civil rights laws, including Title VII. And the NDOs that I've seen around they're not talking about bringing on additional, at least the ones I'm familiar with, they're not talking about bringing on additional manpower, but rather taking individuals such as code enforcement officials or exercise of the police powers with existing staff.
Municipal courts and judges.
And municipal courts to be the enforcement arm of that. So, you know, there is just some thought that needs to be put into these people who already are probably full up on what they're doing in terms of code enforcement, in terms of enforcement of our different you know, statutes, Uniform Public Offense Code, the standard traffic ordinances for the police department, to layer on this additional job duty and responsibility without clearly dedicated training in doing that. Not saying it can't be negotiated or worked around. I mean, if you want to put resources into it, you can certainly do that and probably create a more effective enforcement mechanism. But short of that, I would have some concerns about, for example, a code enforcement official or someone who exercises our regular police powers all of a sudden now coming in and doing an investigation of an employment type nature or denial of services based upon a protected classification, which, at least at the state and federal level, is someone with a high degree of training and professionalism in investigating those types of things. So those are just some of my thoughts, but happy to hear whatever thoughts you might have, Mayor, and I could try to address those.
Well, the question I had that's a follow-up is that, you know, there's conflicting case law on this already. The Baker's case in Oregon, Colorado, there's one that's gone before the Supreme Court, if I'm not mistaken. And there's been a bit of a disconnect or a bit of conflicting case law as to exactly what is considered protection and how does that mesh with the ability of a private company to refuse service for any reason or no reason. So would this just create an opening for liability then on the part of the city if we were to rule, if there was a city municipal court judge that would rule in one way or another, would the party that loses end up coming around and suing the city for some sort of breach of process or anything like that?
We'd certainly have to take that into consideration, carefully draft it. I have a deep respect for my fellow city attorneys, so I'm sure that a lot of them have looked at those various issues and tried to negotiate them.
But they're all coming up with different solutions.
Every one of them is so different.
Every single municipal law or ordinance is different. I mean, radically different in some cases.
Some with evidence, without evidence. I mean,
Right. You certainly have to be mindful of that concern if we do go down that path. But yeah, I understand what your concerns are in that respect.
Okay.
Mayor, would an acknowledgement be
some sort of resolution of support? And,
right, versus
similar to what Dink was
Yeah.
what City Attorney Dink was talking about with regard to what past communities have done, and encouraging the state or the federal government to take action.
Yeah, because unfortunately, I think this is more of a top-down opportunity versus a bottom-up. I don't think municipalities need to get into this body of water, but I think an acknowledgement is fair, but I don't know that we need to saddle ourselves with the potential pros and cons or the staffing, to Ryan's point, of highly trained professionals.
That'd be something that the council would have to sign on to.
I want to say that there was a proclamation or something not terribly long ago that said that Gardner was a welcoming community. It doesn't specifically spell out LGBTQ, but that we are a welcoming community and something to the effect of non-discriminatory. So
I think what they're looking for is something a little bit, no, that's a proclamation. It's not necessarily a sense of the body, which is what a resolution is. It carries a little bit more weight, although it does not have force of law because there's no penalties or sanctions associated with it. But I think that that's what you're talking about, right? Is a resolution and not necessarily a proclamation or just a statement. I mean, I'd be willing to explore it, but I don't think that we're in a position right now until there's case law that's made its way through the Kansas or federal courts on the existing ordinances that are on the books in other communities that,
Yeah, let that Petri dish.
Yeah, I have a feeling there's gonna be some test cases that come through, and I don't want us to be the test case. Not, at least not at this point. So, any consensus?
Consensus
To-
to sit
to
right
talk-
now and do nothing.
To talk about a resolution of support.
You do also have your legislative agenda that you adopt every year.
I mean, I'm okay with the resolution, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean,
if
you're looking talking about feel good, and that's kind of what the other
I'm not a
communities
big
are doing.
feel-good
is
guy.
Feel good.
I mean,
I
mean,
if there's a problem, let's fix it. If not, just.
But I don't see the point in resolutions for feel good. I mean, we're gonna do one for everybody for anything.
Right. I'd like to feel better. I'd like a resolution.
Not necessarily, I think it's just a discrimination in general.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so if you
I mean, here's the
stated that,
thing. Honestly, if I have to go tell everybody I don't discriminate, that's kind of a problem. if I run around and go,
It's kind of the world we live in these days, Mr. Melton.
well, I guess I just don't do it.
So,
That's me though. I just let my actions show,
Well,
which some people don't like.
well, I'll tell you what, there's probably gonna be some more discussion on this.
There might
We'll
be.
just, we will keep our options open. All right? Okay. With that being said, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Motion, Melton, second Gregorczyk, that we adjourn. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, any abstentions? We are adjourned.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye,
See you,
Lee. Thanks again.
Tanika, look at you. Committed to the end.
To the very